Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals public review session for October 22nd, 2018. We're in the special order calendar. Actually, we're changing up the calendar. Item number 8, 2017-143A, 2532 44th Street, Queens.
Okay, so this is the one that we were traveling in tandem with its neighbor, and we weren't voting on it because we thought that maybe somehow or other the neighboring house would implicate it. I don't personally think there's any reason to hold this one anymore. The only thing was that the DOB gave us a copy of the last hearing of the new CO that shows 2-family, but it doesn't mention that there's a variance associated with the site. So back then, I had said the DOB needs to amend this, right? And put the BSA calendar number on it, which they still haven't done. So I'm okay with voting this out, but we need to follow up with DOB, because if it drops out, that's exactly why these things happen, because the BSA recognition drops out.
There is a request for withdrawal on the record, so I don't know.
A withdrawal of the application?
Yeah, to revoke.
Right, okay.
No, right, but the chair is saying she's fine with voting on that, but wants to understand why the BSA calendar number.
Right, we had mentioned it last hearing.
Right, we
It hasn't
mentioned it last
happened.
time, and we really need to, even if we vote on it, we need to follow
Yes,
up on
right.
it. It's not okay that it doesn't have the BSA calendar.
Item number 9, 2017-144A, 2530 44th Street, Queens. Do you want to call that separate?
Yeah, and then call that with the
Yeah,
next one.
okay.
Yeah.
That's one
Go
of the
ahead,
three.
Oh, I'm sorry. Item number 10, 10379BZ, 2530 44th Street, Queens also.
Okay. So. So the applicant, as requested, went through the findings for the variance and demonstrated that the request to remove the condition that the number of units be limited to 2 is not an increase in the requested number or scope of waivers, which were granted in 1979. That's a good point. It remains unclear to me why the limitation was imposed, and perhaps that is a good lesson for the board going forward in terms of conditions. Why do we make a condition? We should always explain it so future boards can know why in the world there is this condition. We had asked for a survey to establish the actual height of the so-called basement above grade and the floor to grade height, inside the basement. We didn't get that. I'm trying to imagine why the board demanded that there only be 2 units. And I'm guessing, because it was shown on the drawings as a cellar, that was a cellar. Perhaps it's not a cellar anymore. Maybe it wasn't built as a cellar, is the point. And then we also asked for the plans to show compliance with the multiple dwelling law. I did see plans that make sort of passing reference in places to the multiple dwelling law, but that's not the same thing as showing compliance. By converting a building built after 1929 as a 2-family to a 3-family, it becomes what's known as a converted dwelling under the definition of the multiple dwelling law, subject to Article 6 of the multiple dwelling law. So the drawings have to go through all the points in Article 6 and show clearly that they comply with all aspects, which may require a second means of egress. And also, there are certain requirements for basement occupancy, and if it's a cellar, certain requirements for cellar occupancy. If it doesn't meet those requirements, that's a whole other subject. That would be a waivers of multiple dwelling law, which was not the original understanding. I do want to note, because we've had some opposition on this case, that the building next door at 25-28 44th Street is a legal 3-family with a certificate of occupancy, and it has a 3-foot 6-inch side yard, whereas this, the subject building has a 4-foot side yard. And some of the discussion was, are 3 families typical of the area? The applicant provided us, I thought, a lot of good information. It's actually more than typical, because it's not just 3 families, we see 9 families. families, all that.
And also the trend since 1951 has been to build at least 3 families, except for this and the next door neighbor, who the
Right.
2 variance cases.
Yes, right, and restricted for an unknown reason, the only thing I think of is they were cellar units, so. I also want to say that the building next door, not the attached building, but the building that shares that easement, has an open ECB violation for work without a permit to install a bedroom in the cellar. And ECB violations also show that work without permits was done to create the 3rd unit in the building, which was later resolved because now it has a certificate of occupancy. So I actually, in summation, I don't think that the BSA's review of the subject application implicates the neighbor's property or its easement in any way, and I think we need to move on. Does anybody else want to?
I agree with you.
Okay.
Do you want to keep going with the regular? Are you ready, Jello? No.
We can go to Jella, or we can go back to Jella. Catch up again?
I don't want to
Right?
raise off.
We're going back to number 1.
Yeah. So this is a Build It Back calendar. Items number 1, 2018-157BZ, 59 Andrew Street, Staten Island.
So, as you can see in the printout that I gave you, this application is requesting a waiver for side yards. It's a single-family 2-story detached home in Staten Island in the South Beach Community District 2, zoning district R3X. This is an elevation and rehab alteration, and the original home was approved by DOB, but because of construction activities, it was over-elevated by 1.2 feet. So therefore, the existing non-compliant side yards are considered an increase in the degree of non-compliance and therefore require waivers from BSA. And this property, through the Build It Back program, is requesting a waiver of the board's rules of practice and procedure.
Okay, but it's not that, sometimes it was over-elevated, but it wasn't shifted in its horizontally.
It wasn't shifted, however, there was a slight increase in the floor area by
02.
48 feet.
Square feet?
But still within allowable. Okay.
Yes, within allowable FAR, .32 and .32 originally, .34 proposed, and the .5 with the 20% allowance is permitted in this zoning district.
Okay.
Item number 2, 2018-158BZ. This is 622 Cross Bay Boulevard, Queens, also Build It Back.
Okay, this is a property that is located in the neighborhood of Broad Channel, Queens, within Community District 14. It is an R3A Special Coastal Risk District, and the waivers are for front yard, which it has 2 front yards because it's a corner lot, and height. So the front yard that's required is 10 feet, and the proposed front yard on Cross Bay Boulevard is 4.8 feet, and on East 7th Road, which is a through lot, so the lot fronts on 2 different streets, is 1.0 feet, which is actually a slight improvement over the original conditions, which had a 4.8 foot front yard at Cross Bay Boulevard and a 0.2 foot front yard at East 7th Road, so it's a slight increase in the front yard at East 7th Road. And the side yards are compliant, there is no rear yard, and the height Due to an over elevation of 0.7 feet from the DOB approved building height of 24.6, it was over elevated to a total height of 25.3. The maximum height permitted pursuant to the Appendix A neighborhood recovery areas, Article 6, Chapter 4, is 25 feet for total height, so it's 0.3 feet above the total height permitted. And the maximum base height is 19 feet permitted, and it's 21.3 feet proposed, so that's about 2.3 feet above the maximum perimeter wall height. This property also received a GCL 35 waiver from BSA in 2016 and is elevation rehab substantial improvement, and are requesting a waiver of the board's rules.
Okay, and the height is, if it's within the ability, our special permit range? You're
Yes.
allowed to approve up to 10
10%.
feet more? Okay,
10% is
10% more,
Yeah.
okay.
it's within the threshold of the special permit.
Item number 3, 2018-159BZ, 110 East 8th Road, Queens.
This is a property also in Broad Channel, Community District 14, R3A Special Coastal Risk District. The lot is 8,250 square feet. It's a single-family, two-story detached homes. The waiver requested is building height. All of the yards are compliant with the R3A zoning regulations. The home was over elevated by 1.8 feet and slid slightly to the rear by 2 feet, so it's not in the exact same footprint, but the yards are still compliant with zoning. So the base height, the maximum permitted in Appendix A is 19 feet. The proposed is 20.6, which is a non-compliance of 1.6. The total height from DFE, design flood elevation permitted in Appendix A is 25 feet, and this is 24.6. So they
it's
more? I'm sorry, 25.6. That's a typo, 25.6. So it's a .6 non-compliance. So they're not compliant with perimeter wall height and total height. And this is also an elevation rehab, and they're within the threshold of the 10% increase in height permitted by the special permit, and they're requesting a waiver of the board's rules of practice and procedure.
I'm curious about these lifts. We've watched them lift, right? And if they're using these hydraulics to bring them up. And I'm curious actually what the contractor is doing to determine when to stop, right? So is it the measurement from grade where he knows he has to get to the DFE? And so he gets to the DFE, and so it really is the measurement of the house itself that's inaccurate, right? Or are they just lifting it to where it feels good, and then, they're off by 6 inches, or they use a tape measure, but they measure off the wrong thing? Or, I'm just curious what the process is. If somebody from Build It Back maybe has a nice anecdote, I'm just curious.
I can request that they provide that information
Okay.
tomorrow.
Item number 4, 2018-160BZ, 33 Roosevelt Walk, Queens.
So this is a property within Breezy Point, Community District 14, an R4 zoning district. Please note that Article 6, Chapter 4, Appendix A does not apply to Breezy Point. So they have they have to comply with the underlying zoning district. It's not modified for them, for those properties in Breezy Point. The waivers requested are front yard and rear yard. So the front yard required is 10 feet or 18 feet pursuant to Section 2345. The original conditions are 14 feet, 10 inches, and that they're maintaining that front yard, the exact same front yard. Actually, the home is in the exact same footprint as the original. And the side yards are compliant with the underlying zoning, The rear yard required is 30 feet, but there's an existing non-compliant rear yard of 12 feet 8 inches. So due to an over elevation of this home, it was over elevated by 10 inches. This was an increase in the degree of non-compliance of the front yard and rear yard, so they require a waiver. And they're requesting a waiver of the board's rules of practice and procedure.
Okay, and, but meanwhile, it's within the height maximums.
Yes, the height is actually 20 feet 6 inches, well below the 35 feet permitted in the underlying zoning district. But please note, the height is not modified to be shorter for this because it's not a neighborhood recovery area.
Go on. Item number 5, 2018-161BZ, 30 Roosevelt Walk, Queens.
So this is also a property in Breezy Point, Community District 14, R4 zoning district. It's a through lot, and it has two frontages, Roosevelt Walk and Beach 215th Street. And the waiver requested is for the front yard, which is 14.7 feet on Roosevelt Walk, along Roosevelt Walk, which is non-compliance of either 10 or 18 feet required in the R4 zoning district by section 2345. And the home was over elevated by 0.9 feet. And the height is still within the maximum. It's 23.3 total height, which is well under the 35 feet permitted in the underlying zoning. And this property is also requesting a waiver of the rules of practice and procedure.
Go on. Item number 6, 2018-162BZ, 70 Bedford Avenue, Queens.
This is also in Breezy Point. We had a few properties in Breezy Point this time, and R4 zoning district. I may have not mentioned this for the other properties, but, you know, there's this, for zoning it's one large zoning lot in Breezy Point, as most of us all know. We just use the plot card to calculate zoning calculations for Breezy Point properties. Just wanted to make that clear. And Appendix A, it's not in a neighborhood recovery area, so it does not apply. The waivers requested are front yard and side yards. So this home was actually increased in floor area. There was a deck that was demolished during construction and replaced with a room, which increased the floor area of the building. The proposed floor area is 0.78 FAR. However, there's an increase allowed of 20% allowed under a sloping roof pursuant to 23-142A. So, and DOB has looked at it, so it's okay with that. Yeah. And the front yard, it has two front yards because this is also a through lot. 17.4 feet proposed along Bedford Avenue and 17.9 feet proposed along Beach 204th Street. This is actually decreasing the front yard along Beach 204th Street, which was 29.5 prior. So this is not compliant with the underlying zoning regulations for front yard. And the side yard,
And the front yard regulations are 18 feet,
10
or 18.
10 or 18. If
So,
it's
but,
not 10, it has to be 18.
oh, I see. If it's not 10, then it has to be 18. So in other words, in this case, it's 18.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it would have been
18, yeah.
close.
And they're just slightly under it for both front yards.
So did this one, is it because this is a prefab house, or is this is an elevation? Yeah, so
No,
they,
it's a rehab.
it's a rehab, so is the addition of that room that creates the increase?
Yes, the addition of the room, it was a 29.5-foot front yard along Beach 204. So the addition of floor area decrease the front yard to 17.9. But the other front yard was non-compliant before.
Right, understood. This is one of the rare ones where it's not just because it's a prefab or something where it only comes in one size and
Right.
they have to shift it, and usually there's some kind of an improvement to the overall situation.
Yes, they did slightly change the existing home when it was rehabbed. And then the side yards are also being requested, which 5 feet minimum and 13 feet total is required. So they are, the original and proposed conditions are 5.1 foot and 4.6. So they're not compliant with total required side yards, but they are compliant with height. And this was also over elevated during construction activities by 0.9 feet. And the non-compliance is
On the
accommodated.
side yards, therefore, were increased.
Yeah, increase the degree of non-compliance. And they're also requesting a waiver of the board's rules of practice.
Item number 7, 2018-163BZ, 123 East 6th Street, 6th Road, Queens.
This is also within the Broad Channel neighborhood in Queens, in the R3A Special Coastal Risk District. And the waiver being requested is for front yard for the single-family, 3-story detached home. And it's the, I'm sorry, actually, that's an error. It's, the waiver being requested is height. So, sorry, I went wrong on this last application, so. Let me see the lineup.
So the designation in the description is incorrect?
Isn't it really for the front?
It's for the
front and rear staircases, and it's the front end?
It's the front yard.
Yeah,
There's
there's a side yard.
something, there's an error in my information sheet, but the front yard is 7 feet 3 inches, which is less than the 10 feet required by zoning. So sorry about that. The height is compliant. It's 23 feet 2 inches, which is under the 25 feet, and the perimeter wall height is also under the 19 feet. So there's, I highlighted the wrong section, basically. So
So this was over elevated, otherwise it wouldn't matter?
it was
right?
over elevated by 6.6 inches.
6 foot 6 inches.
No, it's 6.6 inches.
6.6 inches.
Yeah.
Guess someone measured the .6.
They're also requesting a waiver.
Yes.
Yes,
And it's not in the exact same footprint, actually.
but they all require waivers of the board's rules.
Yes, all built.
She was mentioning
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, return to where we left off.
Item number 11, 2018-63A, 30 Columbia Heights, Brooklyn.
Okay. Notes on this. Okay. We have a number of new submissions. One was in late August from the owner's structural engineer. This is the watchtower, right? I want to make sure I'm on the right one. Owner structural engineer indicating that the support structure for the letters is and was capable of supporting the changes in copy from squib to watchtower to another name of similar total letter weight, and underscoring that the letters themselves are not structural. There's also a letter from owner's counsel to City Planning's executive director in late August, arguing that the 2000 zoning resolution text amendment was aimed at limiting the grandparenting of vinyl and flexible signs by adding a new requirement that such pre-zoning text amendment signs had to have been installed pursuant to permit in order to enjoy nonconforming use status. That such provision is a remnant that actually should have been removed when the city council modified other portions of the text prior to its vote, and that such permitting requirement was not intended to apply retroactively to signs installed prior to 1961. DOB has another interpretation of what happened during that time. City Planning has not submitted a response to Owners Council's letter, and although I'm aware that Owners Council may possess special knowledge about what took place at the time, I don't think it's BSA's place to speculate about what may or may not have happened during the legislative process. We have a text, we have DOB practice, and we have facts, and I think we need to take it from there. DOB submitted further arguments to establish that a permit is a necessary proof of a structure's non-conforming status, stating that the term, quote, lawful by definition implies permitted. It cites to the vesting provisions of 11-31 and 33, which really aren't applicable here since we are talking about nonconformities, not vesting. And the original sign in this case was installed before the zoning resolution was enacted, not before an amendment to the resolution to which the vesting provisions apply. And I dare say that if DOB in 1962 had decided to contest the legality of the squib sign, and if that sign was still under construction, then 11-321 might have applied, but only if 11-321 applied to sign structures and not to buildings, as that section apparently stated. That's the same for section 22-B of the 1916 resolution, requiring, quote, building permits for vesting. DOB now conflates the installation of an accessory sign structure with new building construction and paints desperate pictures of buildings flying up without permits on the day before a zoning text amendment to vest. I find this extremely confusing. The zoning resolution provision 11-31 is crystal clear as to what is meant by a lawfully issued building permit, which I could quote. Says a lawfully issued building permit shall be a building permit which is based on an approved application showing complete plans and specifications, authorizes the entire construction and not merely a part thereof, and is issued prior to any applicable amendment to the resolution. I might add, this is not the same language used in section 43-58. In any event, we do have proof that the subject sign structure provided a complete set of plans to DOB for its approval. There is that 1970 copy of the structure of the sign. So that's a lot of information. I don't know what other information they really would have needed to provide to qualify under the 1131 definition, even though it's completely inapplicable to this situation. I do have to say that I find a major consistency in DOB's recent import of these vesting provisions in the present case. Inconsistency.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought you meant.
Yeah.
Did I say?
You said
maybe-
consistency.
Oh, inconsistency, sorry, I didn't accentuate enough. In DOB's recent import of these vesting provisions in the present case, and in its reading of section 4258. 4258 states that as to all signs, both advertising and accessory, all signs erected prior to December 13th, 2000, they shall have non-conforming use status as to sections 4252 through 54 if such sign was erected pursuant to DOB permit. So that applies to all signs. Nonetheless, Administrative Code Rule 49 permits an outdoor advertising company to establish legal nonconforming use status for advertising signs by showing proofs that may not include permits, for example, by presenting leases and photographs. how can we reasonably treat accessory signs differently from advertising signs with respect to enforcement, or apply a different standard to the application of nonconforming status as to 4255, which is another provision, for non-advertising signs. I believe there has been Supreme Court cases on this subject. And knowing how poor DOB's records are going back to the pre-90s days, how would most sign owners prove their nonconforming status if they had to produce permits for every one of their signs now? Whereas they didn't when Rule 49 was established. They were allowed to provide these other proofs, and it sounds like all of a sudden DOB is saying, no, take it back, show us your permit, and now we're beginning a whole new kind of registration process, and Rule 49 has to be amended. So I'm curious, is DOB now planning to amend Rule 49 to change the permitted proofs to follow this apparently newly adopted approach in 4258? Owner's submission reiterates DOB's nonconforming pre-1991 proofs requirements in its proposed TPPN and in its existing TPPN 14 of 88, which, though not specific to signs, are consistent with the approach taken by Rule 49, which has to do with the record keeping at DOB prior to 1991. I also find confusing DOB's parsing of the word, quote, replacement, which is permitted by zoning resolution section 5282 to exclude even the removal of letters from the sign structure and their, substitution with different letters. We don't want to use the word replacement in the sentence. I may be misremembering, but if the former History Channel sign, now the Love Radio or something like the Heart Radio sign made up of individual letters mounted to a structural grid is or were a non-conforming sign, which I believe is non-conforming because it's within distance of an arterial, is DOB saying that all of those changes in text were not replacements or reconstructions, but something more and hence impermissible? So that's the end of that sign. Is that what we're saying? Or more than incidental repairs of the sign structure? And how did we get to section 5221 anyway, which applies to structures when 5282 controls non-conforming signs? It seems as if DOB is now saying that the sign structure itself is a non-conforming use independent of the sign text. I believe this is treading into new territory. We briefly discussed the subject of use with respect to a sign structure in a recent variance case, and we were at a loss to decide what is a sign structure when it's sitting there all alone on a piece of property, use. And even if we were here to determine that the text says that permits must be produced and that DOB and Rule 49 have not followed the clear direction in the text of the zoning resolution as amended in 2001, I go back to the poor record keeping at DOB, the amazing fact of having discovered even a page in a ledger book indicating that a permit had been applied for, and the logic of having gone through all the trouble to apply for a permit, obtain an approval, and then not to have obtained the permit in itself in spite of installing the subject sign, and of the added illogic that in spite of no permit having been obtained, DOB nonetheless retained in its archives for at least 10 years copies of approved drawings of the sign structure that the Watchtower's architect used to copy for his own application to modify the text of the sign. So I can't connect all those dots to come to DOB's conclusion. The owner also provided extensive documentation to establish that the sign has been used continuously since it became non-conforming in 1961 and has continuously been accessory to the use in the building. This was submitted in response to a DOB comment at the last hearing that the building use had discontinued, rendering the sign advertising. That's not something that we actually wanted the owner to go through, but in anticipation of DOB taking a collateral attack. Didn't necessarily recommend that they do it, but understand why they did it. I'm I didn't make a chart, I don't know if anyone else did, of whether the proofs connect for every 2 years. And I think there really does need to be something like that shows, this is really for the property owner's sake, that shows there's a connection for every 2 years since the installation of the sign. And that's both that the sign was up, which really, I think, you just get New Yorkers who drove across a bridge. But that both that the signs were up and also that the buildings were occupied by those 2 users. There should be at least a chart that makes it clear there's not more than a 2-year lapse. And while I'm not sure that it's really relevant, given my opinion of the establishment of use, I also agree with the appellant that the measurement to determine whether the sign complied with section 42-542 should be taken perpendicular to the sign face. Otherwise, how do you determine whether the sign complies with the required angle relative to the residence district? The language in the text is that it should, quote, face at an angle of not more than 90 degrees away. I think it's pretty clear that it isn't a question of whether it's visible at all. A sign face is actually a term of art in the sign industry, right? I think it's even in the zoning resolution in other places, right? And so we think of that as the plane, right? And it's the plane, therefore, that has to face more than 90 degrees away. Otherwise, the language would have been more severe, imposing, say, a 180-degree orientation, which could have easily been done. Its back has to be to the residence district, to the line of the residence district, or some words to that effect, right? Those were my comments. Others?
I agree with everything you've said. I think the documentations that have been submitted did not, from DOB, did not convince me of the arguments, and I did see inconsistencies in our past evaluation of some of the sign regulations and the arguments DOB has presented and how that is being applied, not appropriately in this case. I want to specifically pick up one of the sign cases. This was the Prince Street sign, where I think a lot of documentations were provided, and one of the main documentations the applicant was relying on were the photographs, and DOB was very clear that those photographs clearly indicated that these signs did not exist before. An advertisement sign, not a business sign, an advertisement sign did not exist before the BQE approach was built. In this case, very clearly signs, photographs, in addition to everything that you've said, I just want to put that in, is that very clearly there are documentations of photographs indicating that the sign was very much in place well before the change in the regulation of December 15, 1961.
The Prince Street sign was the one where we had a photograph that showed it missing.
Right, yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah, right.
Right, and DOB was using that as a very strong argument, and we agreed with that. But in this case, I think the photographs are very clearly showing that construction happened, and it was completed before December 15, 1961. So I think based on the Rule 4915, I mean, it doesn't give a priority, but it gives a list of documents that needs to be provided, and so I'm not sure why this is being overlooked and just the permit is being used as the sole documentation that would validate the existence of this sign. And I agree with you with the way the distance from a residential district is being analyzed. I do not recall that was the way it's being measured, so I do not agree with DOB's assessment of that.
I think with respect to Rule 49, the only thing I can think of is that's a rule that applies to outdoor advertising companies and the signs they install.
Right.
And that's how they're distinguishing this, because this is not installed by an OAC.
Right.
But,
even if you were to apply
yes, yeah.
you know, since there isn't any other regulation, if I were to use that regulation, it still
Right,
doesn't fit in with the arguments we have heard so far.
right.
I mean, I think just to say in addition, it seems to me that any regulations for outdoor advertising, if anything, should be more stringent because it's a more noxious
Exactly.
use. But I agree with you all about the inconsistencies, and I had one additional question about the inconsistencies about DOB's argument as first it's a structure, then it's a building. When we talked about the C of O and the fact that no challenges were ever made to the C of O, and so we questioned whether or not this sign was actually legally non-conforming or not, because if it was illegally there, then why not challenge the C of O? They stated to us, DOB, that, well, the C of O doesn't really talk about signs. It talks only about the building, and this isn't a case of a building, this is a structure and a sign. And then, in this submission, they talk about, zoning ZR 11-331 and vesting of buildings to talk about, the word lawful and what it really meant in terms of its relationship to a permit issued for building construction. So all of a sudden, they're pulling in buildings. So it just seems to me that DOB might be using just every weapon in its arsenal in terms of argument and throwing it at the wall, and we really have to determine, which is actually a consistent representation of their policy and interpretation of the zoning resolution.
Other comments?
Yeah, I have a comment regarding the structural engineering report. The structural engineer kind of left it open at the end. He indicated that if changing the letters would change the exposure area for the wind load, for example, or would it change the weight acting on the sign structure, that would be like a structural alternation or a structural scope here. But he said in case the weight is the same, no change to it, the exposure is the same, that wouldn't be considered as a structural work. And I 100% agree with him, but he didn't give us like a determination whether the proposed change for the letters would.
Oh, we don't know the proposed change.
Right.
So
It's either 3 letters that says the address, like 3CH or something like that, or the word panorama. So panorama has the same number of letters as Watchtower, and so kind of the
It's not the same number. It should be, if you look at the
Same
letter.
weight.
Yes, it should be number one, the same weight, and more important than the weight actually, the service area when the wind hits, the exposure area for the letters should be the same as whatever is existing today.
But that's only so you don't have to beef up the structure,
Exactly,
right?
yes.
Which arguably you're allowed to do. You're not allowed to remove the sign, but you're allowed to make structural repairs and alterations according to the zoning resolution. So I think what DOB was getting at is saying the letters themselves are part of the structure.
Part of the structure.
And
No,
we-
that, I disagree with that.
Okay. Heather?
I would just like to add that in light of the DOB not consenting to toll the continuous use requirement pending the outcome of this instant action, unless the DOB presents some compelling evidence otherwise, I would be comfortable voting on this tomorrow.
Can I make a question? Would it be beneficial for us to get the chronological chart today?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I just think that the property owner should go really quickly and take all their information and just make sure they've got all the dates covered. Some of the things they showed us are long-running, right? And some of the things are points in time. So when you have a long-running one, if I were doing the chart, I'd have something that goes on one side that's the long-running thing, where you can say, there was, just for argument's sake, there was a lease that went for 10 years. That's a long-running thing. Then there were these points that show that the lease was actually active, because we've also heard arguments from DOB that says, just because you have a lease didn't mean you
Right.
installed it,
I
Or
went
that
through
you're
the,
using it.
or that
Yeah.
you used it.
I went through the documents, and they provided a lot of, like you said, supporting documents, along with the lease, all the other activities that further showed that there was some activity going on, or there were documents that indicated there was work going on there. So I think if those two can be paired together.
Yes.
For tomorrow's hearing would be very helpful. And I think we should weigh in on it tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. Move on? There's a lot of material to read, so thank you, everybody, for digging through that.
It was very.
New cases, item number, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. New case is item number 12, 2018-14A, 596 East 81st Street, Brooklyn.
So, a process server attempted to serve DOB's papers to the property owner at the above address in April. BSA sent also a letter by certified mail, return receipt requested to the purported property owner on August 22nd, the owner's name being Daniel Nelson, at the subject address, but there was no confirmation of receipt, right? I want to tread very carefully here, as we don't want the non-appearance of the property owner to prejudice their property rights, especially, as is likely the case here, the owner is not savvy about zoning and the multiple dwelling laws, and does not appear to be represented by counsel.
But we did send again, October 4th.
Yes.
I sent it certified regular mail to Daniel Nelson, and also, I can't pronounce the person's first name, Lamel Nelson, who is also indicated on the deeds.
Right.
Department of Finance, I'm assuming that, I believe it says indicated as his wife. I also sent to an address in Florida, which was refused.
Did you get the address in Florida? Is that the bank?
No, that was an address that I found in one of the
in the
searches I
paper.
did. But, I mean, and the other ones from UPS, when we sent them out, unfortunately, they're not updated in the system.
One,
We haven't gotten them.
you
we
didn't have
received
anything
nothing
back yet.
Yeah.
So, I think sometimes when people get certified mail, they don't pick it up because they're afraid of what it is. That's. We also sent the
Regular mail, and
you
also,
sent-
I sent it regular mail and certified mail, and we also send it to property owner of East 81st Street. I figured maybe one of them will, but
Yeah,
received
okay.
nothing back.
And one of the reasons, I just have to say as an aside, that I'm so concerned about this is that, in looking for, do we have the right address and all that stuff, I went on to Acris, I went on to Department of Finance, where you pay your taxes. Taxes are more or less paid to date, so someone's receiving tax bills unless they're paying them online, in which case they're not getting the bills, and all of that. But one of the things I saw in Acris, there's a mortgage on this property. When you get a mortgage, you're required to have a C of O, right? And if the bank learns that, for instance, the C of O is revoked, if that were our decision, that results in a foreclosure. So this is really incredible prejudice of the property owner's property rights, not just where you get an ECB violation and then you never pay the fine, right? So that's why I'm so cautious about this, but we do what we have to do. There is an October 2017 partial vacate order on Biz, but no open violations. Submissions show only that the front unit was vacated. I didn't understand why the back unit wasn't also vacated, except that, these kind of it's again, a converted dwelling, you're allowed to have 3 units in the converted dwelling, but not if the unit in the lower level is a cellar. So, and in this case, it looks like it really is a cellar. You go down through the back into a pit. And so you're not, the rule for the multiple dwelling law about cellar occupancy is it has to be at grade with the backyard. So I actually need a little bit of clarification on the plans that were provided by DOB. The drawings have stickers on them indicating they are for job number 59122, including the drawings by architects Cavi and Cavavit, floor plans that show the cellar level as open, and the elevations that clearly show the lowest level is a cellar, 4 feet below curb level and 3 feet above it. And the Salvati architect drawings are also for job number 59122, but show ADA compliance details and a professional certification stamp. So those must be the post-1989 drawings. I can't read any of the dates or even the address on the Cavavit drawings. So I'm trying to figure out what it is the DOB is trying to show us by submitting these 2 different packets of drawings. For instance, are the Cavavit drawings, do they tie in to the NB application so that we can be sure that this is a post-1929 converted dwelling? That's the other thing. So the multiple dwelling law has two different rules about converted dwellings, and it depends on when the building was built. DOB is saying they think it was built much later than 1929. I think they think it's in the 60s. And so it makes a big difference on how you apply the multiple dwelling law. And then, and also did the Salvati architect respond to the notice of objections that were sent on August 9th, 2017? I'm guessing no, since they are no longer being paid by the owner. I'm assuming they're not being paid by the owner, right? It's a fair guess. And how is the notice communicated to the architect and the owner? And what is it, anyway? It's sort of an order that you produce drawings, and I don't really know how that works. How does DOB enforce against that? This is for DOB, that they need to provide the multiple dwelling law section that makes section 146 applicable to converted dwellings. So DOB goes through a list of violations. And they say that there's a violation of section 146, and I don't see that that's applicable to a converted dwelling. That has to do with means of egress. So I think actually DOB is in error there. Article 6, which is converted dwellings, only provides for two means of egress, only requires them when converted dwellings, which is the building itself, are combined. So that's C3D, Article 6, Section 187(1)A, which explains when you combine converted dwellings, you need two means of egress. So I think that DOB is incorrect about that noncompliance. With respect to any cellar occupancy at all, Section 177(1) sends you to Section 34(6) or 177(3). So I'm curious whether this location complies with these provisions, and I don't see how you reconcile, these are different sections in the multiple dwelling law, 176 with 177(3), except that I think where it does qualify, the cellar is deemed a basement. So this has to do with the converted dwellings are absolutely not allowed to be occupied in the cellar unless. So it just says no cellar occupancy of a converted dwelling with a residence unless. And the unless is if the cellar and the rear yard are at the same level. Okay, those were my comments. It's kind of an unfortunate situation. Okay, anybody else? No? This is the arcane world of the multiple dwelling law. Yeah? Did you want to? No? Okay. Are we
I think it
good?
wouldn't hurt, while I appreciate there were 3 attempts at service, personal service in this, because of that this is a person's property right, I would appreciate if they attempt service once again,
Personal service again.
personal service again.
I'm really fearful that the owner thinks this is something that they can sort of ignore, and they don't realize that the ramifications are foreclosure, actually. Okay.
Continue, SOC continued hearing items. Item number 13, 86649BZ, 200-01 47th Avenue, Queens.
July 10th, 2018 was the last submission on this, and the hearing was administratively adjourned due to late filing. It was also incomplete. That hearing was the third adjournment, and letters were sent. Return receipt requested to the owner and representative, advising them that there would be no further adjournments, but I don't believe we received the signed green cards returned. So out of concern that the July 10th submission may not have been responsive to our comments, we also reached out by email, right, and phone to the property owner and tenant, and in the hope that they appear tomorrow, and just in case their representative doesn't. But actually, we did all this prior to reading the submissions, because we didn't know, because the July submission was incomplete, right? So we didn't know whether the current submission would complete that. But they actually, the July submission was actually very responsive, although it missed one critical point, and that is about the enlarged plot. On the statement of facts, there's a reference to, on page 3, there's a reference to an enlarged plot. This is a pre-61 variance, and we are not permitted under section 1141 to consider a pre-61 variance if the zoning lot was enlarged after 1961. We asked for information about this in January. And the drawings of the previously approved drawings, it's hard to compare that lot to what we've got. So we really need for the owner's rep to dig through and make sure that the lot hasn't changed in size since pre-61. So that's digging through the records, right? Otherwise, it ends up becoming a new variance, right? We also, we need to have fire department, sorry. We have fire department sign off, sorry, but we need them to comment on the storage building, in that metal, that storage container that's proposed to be permanent because of the things that were proposed to be stored in it. They say it includes motor oil, antifreeze, and other vehicle accessories, oil and air filters, and used auto parts, frequently used auto parts, in addition to dry oil absorbent materials, namely oily rags, snow removal equipment, and used tires. Many of these things are flammables, so fire department needs to comment. There was also a comment from the community that they want to be sure that that kind of, let's say, dangerous stuff isn't stored in that container, which is adjacent to residences. I talked about this at the last hearing, that I have trouble with the idea of these non-permanent structures becoming permanent. And they responded to, the applicant responded to that issue by having an architect submit a letter that says something to the effect about the distance that the footings need to be from the USTs, but they didn't show a drawing showing what that would reveal. It was just that they need to be 10 feet away from the USTs. It looks like there's plenty of room to do that. I don't know how, if the footing is a 4-foot wide footing, whether that implicates anything. So we actually need that. The other way of approaching this, which we've done on other sites that also have these kind of storage containers, is they instead just build an enclosure around that corner where they put a fence around it. And that conceals the container and conceals the dumpster, which right now is not in an enclosure. And because right now you can see this container from the street, but if they just had a fence, you wouldn't be able to see it, or maybe you'd see the top of it, but it's not that big of a deal then. So that's that's a lot cheaper solution. And if you have footings, then you don't need footings for we just need them for the fence, to the extent you have footings for a fence. Anybody else on this? Oh, and then, sorry. We need a complete set of drawings because they keep getting submitted like one drawing at a time that are signed and sealed, and all drawings from going forward need to have the current date on them. So we shouldn't see that the drawing was done in 2015. It needs to be a drawing dated in October of 2018 and signed and sealed. Okay, I think that was it. Anybody?
And you needed a zoning analysis, I think, right? A separate zoning analysis chart?
We did?
We didn't get a current zoning analysis chart?
Okay.
There's something That was submitted as part of the original application, though that's shown as void.
The zoning analysis chart,
Yeah.
it had to be corrected. I think that was one of the last things that you guys asked, the commissioners asked for.
I see, okay.
And he mentions it in his statement, but it's not,
It
was not
didn't get-
submitted.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, he mentioned it.
Okay.
Item number 14, 7-57BZ, 2317 Ralph Avenue, Brooklyn.
We've been at this one a long time. Okay, so our last hearing on this was in April with 2 adjournments since to allow improvements to be installed. We were supposed to have received panoramic photos showing the lot to be resurfaced, restriped, and parking bumpers for 19 spaces, removal of the coffee cup sign, repair of perimeter fencing, landscaping of the southeast corner. 3 photos were provided, and after looking at them for a really long time to try to hope that it was supposed to be, the architect had offered a panorama. That's not what these were. But, so after looking at them a long time and trying to imagine what a panorama would look like, I believe they show the coffee cup is gone. The new perimeter fencing along East 65th Street is shown from the outside. Landscaping along the perimeters are on one side in the ground with curbs or in a planter box, and I can't tell if the lot was resurfaced or striped because of the angle of the camera. Yeah.
I was at, I had a site visit there, I think that was on October 8th. And it is restriped, resurfaced, and the bumpers are there, the fences are, as shown in the photos, new fences, cup is gone, planting is in place.
Yay.
So
Okay.
it looked very clean. So I was satisfied.
Yay. Okay. The plan was supposed to be revised to show more landscaping in the southeast corner, but I don't think, and we didn't get that, but I think we're done. Okay.
Item number 15, 3058BZ, 18417 Horace Harding Expressway, Queens.
The community board met in mid-September and recommended conditional approval with 8 abstentions. They said that they recommend conditional approval for a 10-year term with the following stipulations: no storage of vehicles on site, the retaining wall needs to be repaired, the applicant complies with the request of BSA recommendations regarding the installation of bollards at the rear of the property, and the relocation of gas service tank not to be near the sidewalk. I think they mean the dispenser. And that prior conditions that apply remain in force. We have fire department sign-off. Plans were revised, but I'm still not persuaded by the revision. First, I think the dispenser on the pedestrian sidewalk makes access to the convenience store dangerous, as there is actually no place for pedestrians to walk that isn't a driving lane and/or where a car door isn't swinging. We had the same comment at the last hearing, and the applicant merely slid the dispenser over a bit to be more than 10 feet away from the building, to be 10 feet from the building. I actually think the dispenser should be removed as creating traffic hazards or circulation hazards. Second, we discussed the bollards removal, but they were supposed to be replaced with a sidewalk wrapping all the way around to the entrance. Instead, the bollards were removed and the sidewalk, there's no sidewalk now in front of the entrance to the convenience store, and so therefore nothing to protect pedestrians from vehicular movement. Third, the dumpster needs to be in an enclosure, and I don't know why it isn't in that triangular area that has an opening on Booth Memorial, except that I see in the photographs there's a little step to get to it, but you could fix that. You could feather up a little ramp, and then the dumpster could roll out of that area. As proposed, there are now only 2 parking spaces on the lot for the convenience store, and I don't actually know whether that's enough. I'd like others to comment on that. The other spaces were removed, though, in response to community board concerns about illegal car storage. So I see they're kind of fighting two different issues here. And they need to repair the wall as requested by the community board and do it now, paint the brick walls to be uniform, and paint the fences. Anybody else?
I actually was not clear about the board's recommendation regarding the installation of the bollards at the rear of the property, because this is not accessible to anybody, and I'm not sure why that was specifically.
No, it's not at the rear, it was at the, in front of, with the original proposal, and I think the community board described it at the rear, but the original proposal had bollards right in front of the main door of the
Right.
convenience store.
Right.
And so, and we said, take those out
Right.
because cars are going to hit the bollards.
Okay, so this is what they're referring to.
Yeah,
as the rear.
yeah.
Okay.
They're,
That's fine.
I think they just
Because
meant
that's,
the
what
rear.
I was thinking of the rear being the Booth Memorial.
Yeah,
That
no,
was
no,
not-
that's not, yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Any opinions about whether 2 spaces or parking spaces are okay for the convenience store?
I think this is not a place we really want people to linger around too much, so I think 2 spaces should be okay, as long as one is an ADA. And,
That it is.
Most people access it from being at the pump. You
Right.
know, when they go pay for their gas, they'll grab stuff. It's not a huge convenience store. It's not like a 7-Eleven where people might browse the aisles looking for snacks and take a long, long time.
it's a hop in, hop out.
Okay.
Move on? Item number 16, 13887BZ, 21836 Hillside Avenue, Queens.
At the last hearing in March, we asked that the business operator attend the next hearing. The hearings in May and July were adjourned, however, but the submissions, I thought, are very thorough, so maybe the operator doesn't need to attend. It depends on what other board members think, because I don't think it's necessary. I believe the board clarified, and our general counsel should note that the reference in the prior resolution to a special permit was in error. The pre-61 variance was extended under section 1141. And I think it's really important to note in the resolution because this word special permit flies around a lot in the older
I
resolutions.
think it was commonly understood at the time that extensions of pre-61s under 1141 were
Special permits, yeah.
Okay,
So that's,
okay.
I think that's.
Okay, so to
Yes,
clarify
very
it for
clearly a variance.
future boards, because that kind of throws us off when we review it. The owner's representative did a search of the underground storage tank status and also hired a UST installer to review the site, but both were unable to ascertain if or when the tanks were removed. I'm wondering, can we reach out to DEC to see if they have any spill closures or spill reports on this?
It's on Hillside Avenue, 3887.
Yeah. Photos provided show asphalt and sidewalk around the building in need of resurfacing and repair. The light spread diagram shows at least one fixture's lumens spread onto the adjacent property. It should be shielded to prevent this. It's got a really full blast onto the adjacent property. The area labeled grass area on the proposed plan and, quote, buffer zone on the photo key needs to show the type and number of trees. The photos don't actually show much in the way of grass. It was photographed in May, so it's kind of early in the season, but it looks mostly like leaves. I'm wondering whether it matters, but it could be maybe ground cover instead. But on the other hand, can anybody even see in there if you don't walk inside this thing? It's just that the trees are there. They form a really nice backdrop. So,
You have to peek through.
yeah, okay. An operational plan was provided on September 10th, 18. I'm saying the date for benefit of council. It should be incorporated into the resolution. Talks about safety and security, talks about hours of operation, landscaping and graffiti, and how
Should
the...
it be incorporated as a condition or as a?
I think it might as well be a condition, as long as, because that way you ensure good operation of the site.
Got it.
And there are no cars for sale.
Right.
Right. Okay. Well, isn't this, sorry. Yeah. This is car rental. The only cars that are for sale are their own cars, it
No,
says.
But
they
not even on the
stated in the
side.
newest that now that will occur
Oh.
elsewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we add that as a condition.
Move on.
Okay, sorry, just
Let me
a
know when you're
second.
ready.
Just a second, just. Okay. Any other comments on that? Okay.
Item number 17, 2496BZ, 213 Madison Street, Manhattan. It's a McDonald's.
Okay. The fire department letter of October 3rd indicates that the range hood system operating permit has expired and needs to be renewed. They provided again, which we have, the 2008 Lovell-Belcher survey. It shows the walls, which is not an updated survey, it's a 2008 survey. It shows the wall surrounding the yard, the rear yard, located between 16 inches and 23 inches outside of the property line. At the last hearing, I asked that a note be put on the BSA drawings to indicate the property line location as established by the survey of given date. That note is on drawing T-001, but the date of the survey must be 2008, not 2018 as indicated in the note. That's how we perpetuate continued confusion on this. And then, in that same interest, the plans have dimensions on them still that don't show the measurements to the same locations as the survey. For example, there's an 11-foot 5 3/4 inch and a 10-foot 10.5 inch dimensions that are shown on the first floor plan A002 as outside of the wall, hence outside of the property line, but the plot plan, T001, and the survey, the 2008 survey, show those dimensions from the rear of the building to the property line. This needs to be corrected. I'm being a stickler about this because the location of the wall has confused the BSA for several resolutions worth, and I want to clear it up here. I note to our council that each resolution sets forth the building length and rear yard depth, and neither of the two that I copied, I cut and pasted here, match each other or the 2008 survey. So, according to the survey, 2008 Lovell-Belcher survey, which is what we're going to rely on, it does not show the building length, so we're not going to refer to building length. The depth of the site is 100 foot 1 1/4 inches. 100 foot 1 1/4 inches, and the rear yard depth to the rear property line varies from 10 foot 10.5 inches to 11 foot 5 3/4 inches. Okay, that's to the property line.
I had comment on the sign calculation
Okay.
based on the revised.
Oh, let me finish that thought. As long as there are corrections being made to the drawings, the line weights on the drawings are really light, and it's difficult to distinguish the property line from the wall, so please correct this, especially because it's going to be reproduced, and then we're going to lose all the information we spent so much time trying to figure out to make the drawing have gusto with thick line weights. And then, go ahead with your sign.
So the sign calculations and the plan A005, they do not show the two wall-mounted banners. While we had, Commissioner Otley Brown at the last hearing had raised about the flags, those have been removed, but the banners are still there, and they are not included in the plans or in the calculations, so those need to be corrected.
But also, I thought that on A005, it doesn't have calculations. It has a chart, that concludes it's 48 square feet or whatever, but there's no dimensions of the signs, so how do you know it's 48 square?
Right, and it also doesn't even show those signs on the
Doesn't show
brackets that are
those-
sticking
Yeah.
out at all,
So we
which
don't
makes
know
you
if
think
those
they
have been
left those
factored
out.
into the 45 square
Right.
feet or not. We
But
don't
we don't know how they got 45 square feet. It doesn't measure the Ms, the two Ms.
right,
It doesn't measure the big sign. It just tells us this is how big.
So we need that.
We meet that, yeah. And we asked for that the last time. And, okay, yes. Good. Anybody else? No?
Item number 18, 34004BZ, 1579 Forest Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay. The site has been spruced up and landscaping installed, and it looks much better. But there are only 4 photos and no long shots to see the overall look, but it looks much better. The parking study was amended to use Domino Sugar's EIS. So then I asked the obvious question, how is Domino a comparable site where there is public transit access and car ownership is relatively low? This is Staten Island, not Williamsburg. I note that the listing information provided by the real estate broker shows only 21 designated parking spaces. That's the broker sent out listing. I'd like them to explain that because there's supposed to be 38 spaces. With respect to trash, they provided an operational plan, but we don't see where the refrigerated trash storage is that's described in that operational plan, or where it's going to be on the plan. No revised drawings were submitted, and the proposed, quote, refrigerated area isn't indicated on the plans we already have. What I understand from the operational plan is that perishables are moved from the interior refrigerated area at 5 p.m. to the outside dumpster and sit there for 4 hours until pickup by the carters. That's 4 hours in July heat with all kinds of stuff dripping and attracting vermin, and there's, yuck.
Gross.
This is a produce store, so things decay quickly, if not already are decayed by the time they get brought out, because that's often how things go. I need more to understand this. What type of dumpster is it? For instance, we've seen some that are actually compactors and refrigerated themselves, which is the right thing to do in this case. Or they're compacted inside and stored directly before pickup. And also, I wonder why can't the dumpster be located next to the truck dock instead, which is right there up against the building instead of in the middle of the lot? It's true that they built a nice wall around this dumpster, but that was for a Walgreens. It doesn't have the same level of perishables. The community board also asked for another handicapped accessible space, and for the grant, the board's grant to be user-specific, both of which I think are reasonable requests. Anybody else? Oh, and, sorry, and with respect to the DEC monitor of the wells, can we reach out to DEC again to find out what is going on there and whether it has been maintaining the monitor? Do you have the address on this? Here. Yeah, it's Forest, 1579 Forest. Because the owner said, we don't maintain the monitors, they're just there. So is that one of those, nobody's doing it? And I made a note the last time, that note to council, there's an error in the resolution. The required number of spaces should be 38, not 39. Okay, anybody else? No?
Item number 19, 14106BZ, 2084 60th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. There were several additional detailed letters of opposition from very unhappy neighbors who have been living with illegal construction and an eyesore for over 10 years, and I really do feel for them. There is still a stop work order on this project, but no open ECB violations, interestingly. there are 4 construction-related DOB violations. And now there is a programmatic needs analysis to justify all of the illegal construction and change in programming that was all done without BSA review. I still ask, why isn't the mikvah that's shown in the 2007 approved plans or in several modifications under letters of substantial compliance sufficient to meet the needs of only 100 families? We, in fact, rarely see mikvah in synagogues, so I'm not sure, maybe 1 or 2, 1. So I'm not sure how common it is that the use is accessory to synagogue use. I actually did some research on mikvahs. They usually appear in their own separate buildings or in different kinds of community centers and things like that. So I'm not sure how common it is that they're associated with a synagogue. The programmatic needs report doesn't help us understand why the mikvah kept growing in size and why the proposed size is right-sized for this congregation. And likewise, the parsonage, where it is clearly an elderly rabbi and wife with grown children, why such a large apartment? And why not combine the rabbi's study and so on into the same floor as we've seen in other cases? We had a recent one where actually all of the consultations occurred on the same floor as the rabbi's apartment. The owners were directed to remove the elevator stop at the roof and to provide a photograph showing that it was removed. They obviously did not do that. There's to be no access by elevator to the roof, so take that off. They need to show how the perimeter of the property will be treated on the site plan. Will there be fencing, landscaping, and where is the parsonage trash storage that's referred to in the programmatic needs report? You can't just have a few garbage cans in the back, especially if, yeah, you just can't. They need to show all the elevations. They're missing one. How will sound attenuation at the windows be handled? We often have issues with noise from inside disturbing neighbors. And how about the issue which was discussed in the prior hearing about privacy from the windows? They were supposed to be translucent or opaque glass. And the balcony relative to neighbors, what's the plan there with respect to privacy? And they need to show mechanicals, which was mentioned in the last resolution. And if they're on the roof, they need to show them and how they will be acoustically isolated, which was a requirement of the last resolution. And I would like fire department to review these plans as there is no staircase to the roof. And this is a 3-story mixed-use building. And I would just like to add that, you know, when we see this kind of bad behavior on the part of a property owner, and we see a lot of switching around of plans, and I'm trying to dig through the plans to, usually the drawings speak to you and tell you what's really going on. What I see is so much plumbing. I see so many bathrooms. I see bathtubs in places where you wouldn't expect to find a bathtub. And so then I'm like, is this going to become some sort of a spa? Like, what is this really? So, and having been in something like that, where you go to the baths on the lower floors, and then you work your way up slowly to the upper floors where there's other activities, and then there's this beautiful place where you can eat on the top floor. That all fits into a place I've actually been, right? So I can't help but being as suspicious as the neighbors are about the future use here, which I know we're not allowed to assume illegal activity, but we can condition, and we can now have a compliance officer make regular visits to the site. So I want to add that if we chose to approve this, there would be a condition of no commercial catering, no commercial spa or mikvah use for other than congregants and their guests. You know, how you regulate that, I don't know, but
You put that in the CO for sure.
yes, you put it in the C of O, the neighbors can find it, and they can call DOB, and unfortunately, they'll have to be vigilant.
I just had a question for the other commissioners. Were you all satisfied with this being the minimum variance?
So,
Well, this is an extension of.
This is an extension
sure.
of time, so they're
Yeah.
not increasing any degree of variance, it's a program.
no, that's not true. They're increasing the size of the building. The building's taller
Okay.
than what was
so it's also-
originally.
It's an
It's also an
amendment.
amendment.
Yes,
It's also an amendment.
So they're making the building taller. They have 2-foot thick floors. I don't know why, but it's already built. So other than taking down the elevator override,
I understand,
Yeah.
I just, my difficulty is this was, we granted this at a certain way, and we believe that to be the minimum variance. This is a very different application before us, and I really didn't see anything in what was submitted that was compelling to argue that what the existing building as it is the minimum variance that they need.
right, so here's the thing about these
It's
programmatic
already
needs
built.
analyses that have to do with religion, right? Unless you happen to be a member of the specific sect, how can you say whether this thing is needed or that thing is needed? That's the place we're always put, right? Because you can't say, well, I'm a member of XYZ religion, and in the place that I go, we don't have that.
I just want to know what the difference was from when they first applied.
Right.
To today. What has changed that now this is the minimum variance? Because at one point, they believed that what they proposed was the minimum variance, and that's what they needed, and now that's in my opinion, it seems very different, or substantially different. And I'd like to know what's changed, or how this fits. I believe that they owe a certain, even if they make it even a programmatic argument for it, something to support
Right.
this change.
Right. I think that's the thing. The programmatic needs analyst, who we see very often here and is quite good at explaining these things, needs to address that. That's my question about, the main issue is that a lot of the program vanished and got replaced by other program. And part of the vanishing was that the mikvah becomes this rather large facility, which to my mind is being made larger to be open to a broader community than just the congregants. So this goes back to the problems we have with catering halls, all that sort of stuff, which are not for the congregants. Right, and so they need to explain this. Okay.
Move on.
Yeah.
New case is item number 20, 19305BZ, 32 East 31st Street, Manhattan.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application. This was a postponed hearing, so these are the same comments, actually. And now we have proof of notice of hearing, which was effective the last time. Community board waived its right to its review. 2 commercial neighbors in the building wrote letters of support. The statement of fact states it's an amendment for a different user or use. Is that a different filing than an extension of term?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, answer the question. Now it's owned, occupied by Tone House. I don't know what it was before, which is not a spa, but operates physical fitness classes. It was originally approved as a spa. There's no massages here. Acoustical attenuation details are provided with the plans, and the fire department signed off. And then we had a comment from Commissioner Shanda, who said, clarify the occupancy of the space. It's 90 persons versus what's the peak use? That was your comment from the last time. And we do have DOI. So, yeah.
We're good?
Maybe it's not properly an extension of term. We need more on this. But these were comments we gave the last time, so I don't really know.
So, yeah, he was supposed to file an amendment fee, I think, in this one. I have to check my notes on
Yeah,
this one.
okay.
I'll check with Lauren.
And I think last time I had also stated the hours of operation. It wasn't clear. The statement of fact says 4:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. I think that's 7 p.m.
And change the last rate.
Okay.
Just a typo, just to be clarified.
And also if they could clarify the square footage, because the 2006 resolution says 7,350 square feet, including cellar, but the plans say 5,312 square feet, including cellar.
Anything else?
Anybody else?
Good. Item number 21, 17714BZ, 1038 Flatbush Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, we have proof of, I just wanted to make a note about this. This is not a CrossFit, so that needs to be changed in the
Yeah, I saw your
description.
email.
It's a Crunch Fitness.
Okay.
So we have proof of service of initial application of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends approval. This is, so I said that the photographs of the existing signage indicates a crunch. I just want to say why it's obviously not a change in user. Applicant should verify that the operator has not changed since the initial grant, but that was a note I made, and then Rory Levy actually checked through the documents and verifies it's a crunch. This is an application to reconfigure and expand slightly the PCE that was approved in 2015. I just wanted to know if it's a renovation of the already completed gym or it's just a simple expansion in those areas, because actually some areas, or is it they didn't finish? Did they not do the work? Because they're really flipping uses from one side of the building to the other, so it kind of sounds like a gut renovation, in which case that kind of implicates the sprinklers and all of that. The fire department signed off on the existing, but do the sprinklers and fire alarms have to be reconfigured in order to accommodate this?
I think there's a note that says the sprinkler and the fire alarm permitted, installed, and were completed, and will be completed by 2/24/2019. So I assume that
okay.
a revised plan has been submitted, and those, we just need a confirmation if that is what the work
Perhaps the
is based on.
applicant
Yeah.
can consider that tomorrow.
Okay, and then they need to pay the ECB violation and make necessary repairs to the elevator. I'd like to know what the status of that is. They had a lot of elevator violations, and they're the only occupant. And why hasn't the C of O been updated to reflect the use? I'd like to know what items are open, but now, of course, they have a new alteration 2 open, and that might prevent the C of O from being issued, even though that doesn't change the use, so maybe I don't know, it might affect the inspection and so on. So sometimes alteration 2s hold up CO issuance. Okay. Okay, move on.
Item number 22, 32214BZ, 62 Coleridge Street, Brooklyn. This is an amendment of a special
Okay,
permit.
this is a legalization, actually, more than just an amendment. We have proof of service of initial application and notice of hearings to officials. I note that the green cards, with respect to the notice, indicate the initial filing was done in August, while the application was submitted in March, and the community board voted on this in April. So I doubt those green cards are for this application, which is what I was fearing was happening with these flying around green cards. So submit the correct green cards, please. The community board recommends denial because the work was not done according to approved plans. I think that's their general policy. And after digging around in the file for about 30 minutes, I finally found a set of bubble drawings with the cover letter from the architect, so as a result, could understand all of the changes and why they were made. Because, and I wish I'd found those 30 minutes before. I don't have a problem with the as-built, since they would have been acceptable had they been requested the first time. The building is actually set back further from the street line as a result of them, so it's arguably an improvement. Anybody else?
Page 3 in their statement says there's a 1% decrease in lot coverage, but it really should read 1% increase. So they should just correct that part.
Good.
Okay.
Appeals calendar, continued hearing items. Item number 23, 2017-68A, through 2017-96A. This is Chorizi Loop and Frozen-On Lane, Staten Island.
Okay, at the last hearing, I asked for a restricted declaration about the parking and maintenance, and I asked that they both be combined into one. They did provide a restrictive deck about the parking conditions, but there's actually no mention of maintenance of the roadbed and utilities in that declaration. I had asked that the language from the homeowners association materials be added to the deck, to this declaration, to make clear to purchasers that they are responsible for maintenance and repair of all utilities, sidewalks, roadways, et cetera. I found some of the text, so I had to go back through the HOA and try to find the text again. And I tell you, it wasn't easy. I read it, I had to read it a few times before I could find it. I found some of the text actually called out by the applicant with red outlines, and it appears not in a declaration or anything, it appears in the sponsor's affidavit on page 4. And I'm sorry, sponsor's affidavit, and then it also, then there's something else, additional information, because it's not replicated, on page 4 of the Declaration of Covenants. So this document is 160 pages long, and so, you know, I dare a typical property purchaser or owner who's just sort of checking on what their rights are to actually go through this thing. So hence the need to sweep this into a separate restrictive deck that must be recorded prior to CO. A supportive excavation drawing was provided to attempt to address concerns about the collapsing 20-foot-high retaining wall. There is a stop work order and pending inspections on that. Any other comments?
I have one thing to add.
Yeah.
To the declaration. There are also conditions in the fire department's letter, January 4th, 2014, that should be incorporated into the restrictive deck, and that has to do with the hydrants, the heights, the installation of parking signs.
Okay. So hydrants, parking signs, and heights?
Sorry. So their hydrants must be located within 250 feet from the entrance of each dwelling. The height of the dwelling shall not exceed 35 feet above grade plane. As for the fire code, no parking signs at the entrance and along both sides of the access roads where parking is prohibited. And then for this development to comply, for this development to consist of a 34-foot wide fire apparatus road, all buildings must comply with the requirements of section 2621 of the zoning resolution, which states where at least 3 accessory parking spaces are provided for every 2 dwelling units, and no such spaces are located within the bed of a private road. The minimum width shall be 34 feet.
Okay. It's a private road. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, very quickly, I have 2 comments. One of them is from the perspective of you see something, say something, and this is regarding the SOE. The second thing is regarding the drainage, and the reason I'm talking about the second one is because I got scared from the first element, the SOE. So regarding the drainage, I would like to see a note from, or like a certification from the civil engineer, the project civil engineer, indicating that he did look at the drainage issues, and he certifies that no flooding will occur at the subject property or around, and at any property adjacent to it. Like a very generalized, I looked at things, they look beautiful, no flooding, no issues will occur at the subject or adjacent properties. And this will make it for the drainage. For the SOE, I really urge the owner, the architect, and whoever is involved with this project, the SOE designer, please take a look at the design of the SOE one more time. And if the DOB approve this, I believe they need to really take a look at it. I looked at the SOE drawings, and I believe that clearly explain why things shown in the footage that we got last week are like that. I'm not
Why there
gonna
was a
explain,
failure.
I'm not gonna explain, I didn't have a geotech report, but there are some things in the geotech and structural work that you don't need to get a geotech, because if the guy is going right and left, and he's claiming going right and left are like old equal or they are both legit, it should be something right here. And very simple, I saw one of the walls, the height is probably 20 feet plus. He provided what we call a diagonal brace to this wall, and all of the sudden, this diagonal brace is gonna be taken out, and this soldier pine and lagging wall will be replaced with a cantilever concrete wall that's, I believe it's extremely weak sliding wise, so it could slide easily. I'm not sure if these things were like installed, but this is really one of the most trickiest SOE systems when it comes to the construction, like managing the construction stages, the installation of this kind of system. If you have a diagonal brace like this that is needed to hold a wall, when you install the wall, you theoretically, when we calculate this, when we analyze this, we assume that the excavation is gonna be done to the point of contact between the vertical face, the wall, and that diagonal brace. In reality, this doesn't happen. What happens is the contractor usually cuts all the way down and then after that put the diagonal brace.
Right.
If the engineer on site is not very experienced and he can look at the wall, if there is no monitoring for the wall to see how much movement happened, if all these things kind of ignored and the excavation is cut all the way down to close to the final excavation, it means that this diagonal brace is actually useless. And
Thanks.
yeah, and I believe they need to take a look at that system.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this?
I've made multiple statements on the record about this after at the prior review sessions. I still don't see anything that addressed the hardship in this last submission. In fact, I saw nothing that even suggests any hardship just yet, or addresses that we've been asking the question. I think that I think that this is a requirement, as it states clearly in the statute, and we shouldn't ignore such a facial requirement.
Okay. Okay. I just want to add, though, that with respect to that, there was a submission a while back of X number of houses that could be built on long, skinny lots. And whether you accept that as a hardship argument is a different question, but that was the submission that was made in response to our request for hardship information.
I recall, but at the review session, after they submitted that, we at least, I know I did, I believe the chair commented on that not being the only layout they could do, and it not being sufficient in and of itself.
Right, so that's what if you accept the argument, is a different question about than whether they made
propose
an
anything at all.
argument, right? And when we do variances, we keep digging and saying you didn't make the finding. So if you don't think they made the finding, that's how you vote. Okay.
There is, I have written a standard statement. If they want to go with it, I'm fine. If they want to add it to the site plan regarding the drainage, I'm fine with it. If they want to put different statement, I'm okay, but I read it. It says final site grades as well as drainage elements, including but not limited to pipes, dry wells, and stormwater detention, if any, will be designed and constructed in such a way to prevent any flooding within the subject site and within the limits of any adjacent property or structure. So if they want to use that, I'm okay with the wording. If they want to make their own, we'll take a look at it.
Okay. That's what
The
you wanted
drainage
from the civil engineer?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And you want that signed and sealed, right?
Yeah. They can add it to the site plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Move on.
Uh-huh.
Zoning calendar, continued hearing items, item number 24, 19615BZ, 250 Mercer Street, Manhattan.
Okay,
PCE.
we got fire department sign off. I believe that's all we were waiting for, on the fire alarm. Okay.
Item number 25, 2016-4153BZ, 4701 19th Avenue, Brooklyn. This is Project Witness.
Right, so this is an adjournment, which is the fourth adjournment. They say they're waiting for a DOB determination on the staircase.
I'm sorry, they had a hearing last time. It's not correct, the adjournment there.
Yeah,
The August 7th is not correct?
August
A
7th.
hearing on August.
Yeah,
Oh,
they
there
did.
was?
They did.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's a mistake, so if we need to correct that then.
Okay. I don't know why I keep making a mistake. So we'll put them in this.
Can you send Muriel a note to correct?
Yeah, we'll do this. We'll come back. You know why we.
Okay.
Item number 26, 2016-4217BZ, 1665 Bartow Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, they requested an adjournment. I just want to know what the status of clearing the fire department violations is. Because that actually, fire department sent in a letter of opposition saying they have all these violations, so no go until they clear those.
Item number 27, 2016-4347BZ, 1605 Oriental Boulevard, Brooklyn.
Okay, they provided a 1930 Sanborn map that we actually already got, that presumably shows the narrow side yard was a legal non-compliant condition. I mean, these are tiny maps, so you can't really see what the side yard is. I'd like to know if that was what was shown to DOB to persuade them to approve the 2014 plans. Does DOB just accept Sanborn maps like that? I would think no, but anyway. Plans were revised to show retention of adequate existing perimeter walls on the perimeter, which means they need to add to the drawing the note that is the condition that removal of existing material in excess of that shown on the plans will void the special permit. With respect to the rear yard reduction at the second floor, I listened to the video of the hearing, and there was discussion about the house on the corner that is only required to provide a 20-foot side yard because it's a corner lot. BSA-approved drawings were provided for that house and show the house will actually have a 31-foot side yard, so you can't rely on the argument that it's 20 feet, because it's 31 feet. Once built anyway. So what's the argument now for not setting back a bit on the second floor? The houses on the other side of the subject lot have complying 32-foot rear yards, and I do understand that the subject backs up against the side yard of the house to its rear, but all the houses on either side have complying, they're half of the donut. We do have approved ZRD1 and CCD1 for floodplain compliance with conditions, which should be incorporated into the resolution. Should I read the conditions?
No.
No, okay, so you know that's there. Okay. Anybody else?
I actually was fine with the submission, and I was looking at the entire block to see what the neighborhood context is and what the surrounding conditions is, and I really did not have an issue with the rear yard of 20 feet. It's a pretty narrow site and a narrow building, and so I was okay with that.
Okay. Yeah?
Go.
No.
Item number 28, 2017-191BZ, 47 Green Street, Manhattan.
The elevator stipulation was provided. They talked about how they have an agreement with the court or loft board or something to the effect of the service elevator. And unlike what was represented at the hearing, and I do have to remind council They are fact witnesses. They get sworn in. You need to know your fact when you speak to it. Otherwise, you are misrepresenting, and now it's actually considered, according to our new legislation, perjury before the board when you have facts and you misrepresent the facts. So just don't do it. If you don't know, say, I don't know. So, unlike what was represented at the hearing, this is not exclusive access by the tenants to this elevator. I might add that that continues to be the argument in the papers. And again, if it's in your papers, you're appearing before this agency, and you cannot say that a stipulation says one thing when it absolutely says not that thing, right? So the stipulation is permission for the tenants to use the elevator and to have access to it 24/7. It specifically does not exclude the commercial tenant from using it, and in fact allows for them to kind of work out a schedule. So I don't see how that represents a hardship, and anyway, that would be self-created because the owner entered into it, right? I'm not finding in the submission, therefore, any additional information that goes to the A finding for building obsolescence. The cover letter doesn't point us to anything new, and the statement of fact seems to be rehashing the arguments we heard in prior hearings. Few buildings in Soho, or in Manhattan for that matter, have loading docks. This one does have a freight elevator, so I'm not understanding that argument at all. The road width is not a condition of a zoning lot, and this is a 48-foot wide building, so better suited to conforming uses than so many of its neighbors, so I'm nowhere on the A. Anybody else?
I had a question with regards to one of the plans showed that an as-of-right use, they will have to, it wasn't clear, but somehow there are 10-foot, 11-inch wide restricted area was shown around the structural colonnade, which could not be used. It wasn't clear why that number was being used and what DOB or fire egress or other regulatory elements that was governing that. It's in the plan. I'm trying to pull that out.
Maybe because
It's in the as
they're subdividing the space like in our other application because that's more desirable.
So,
Oh, no, that's not a structure, that's the show route of egress.
no, well, it says area restricted by structural colonnade. Now, the structural colonnades are there, but the entire area width is shown as 10'9", and I'm not sure what makes it restrictive and therefore not usable. And that is the argument that is also being used, that therefore loading and all of that further impinges on the usability of the space. So that's a question.
I mean, columns, you put workspaces against columns, shelves against columns, desks against columns. I don't know.
I mean, I agree with the chair that so far they have yet to show a true uniqueness finding, and we are quite a few hearings into
Yeah, we
this
are.
case. We are now on the 4th hearing.
Yeah,
How much longer do we have to torture ourselves?
we don't need
Okay,
to. I
thank
think we gave them the last shot, we gave them an opportunity, and we actually, it's not 4, it's 3, because one was adjourned in August, to give them a break on that, right? Yeah, it was actually adjourned because I had to cut and paste my
Yes,
my comments. Okay, so I agree with you. Any other comments on this? New
Can I go
cases?
back?
Wait.
Sorry. I do have a question. Generally, I mean, some of the cases that were submitted in the prior cases.
Some of the cases they used as support.
As supporting arguments for, just a general question. In the past, narrow street frontage and the width of the street, and the width of the street, narrow street width, has been used as an argument as hardship. Why is it no longer? I mean, in what way?
It's not that it's no longer, and we had a lengthy discussion about the cases that they put forth as examples of why we should find an A finding here. And when we looked at it, I know when I looked at every single case that was granted here was granted not on one or two of the incidences of obsolescence or uniqueness factors that were cited by this applicant, but rather on a bevy of different conditions that were specific to those sites in the variance cases that were granted. And that's why. So it wasn't solely that it was a narrow street. It
Right.
was
One of the many conditions.
it was narrow street and narrow lot width. It was like low ceiling height, small floor plates, double frontage, extremely narrow lot width. There were so many different examples and ways in which those cases that were granted are distinguishable from this case.
But I do have to say that it isn't the width of the street that's the unique physical condition to the zoning lot, because it can't possibly be, right? It's simply that if you're making an argument that the truck has to make a turn into the narrow lot, that it's hard to make the turn, or those kinds of things.
Right, or
That it connects to the subject, but it has to be on the zoning lot that the difficulty occurs.
Right, so oftentimes it was that the lot is narrow and can't provide a loading berth or a loading zone, therefore, truck has to come into this block and just stop in front of the building. Narrow.
Blocking traffic.
Yeah, narrow street width makes that an almost impossibility. That would be the argument.
Right, but never as a standalone.
No,
And-
no,
yeah.
that's not what
Yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to understand why.
Right.
And that has been, I think most of the cases, we have seen that as not a standalone, as another reason. And I'm trying to understand.
And I think that those, it's more like it's trying to understand the totality of the circumstances, but it doesn't mean that each of the circumstances is a condition that's unique to the zoning lot. It's to show the circumstances surrounding. Sometimes we just talk about, you no longer have, fat rendering. So that's not something unique to the zoning lot. It's more about how, social conditions have changed, things like that, right?
Right, and when you look at the totality of the benefits of this property, it actually sets it ahead of most of the other properties in Soho, except for the fact that it has to have a conforming use on the first floor. But other than that, it's a lot wider than most of the buildings in Soho at 48 feet wide. It's built to its FAR, so it's not drastically underbuilt. It's got great frontage. It's got a loading platform and a freight elevator, as well as a regular elevator. So it's got a lot of things that all of the other properties that qualified for variances didn't have. So I would say that this is in a beneficial position.
Right. Okay.
Ready? New cases, item number 1, 2017-257BZ, 159 North Street, Brooklyn. This is being postponed for lack of proper notice.
Correct.
Item number 2, 2017-303BZ, 1281 Forest Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay. We have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval with 6 opposed. There's an email from an immediate neighbor at 17 Hamlin Place concerned that the easement, that's, I don't know whether it's his easement or a general easement, will somehow be used in this project. Since this is in Staten Island that doesn't use ACRES, I never have any luck accessing the property records there. The land use and tax maps, though, show a narrow access strip described on the site plan as a 10-foot wide lane that runs from Hamlin Place to the rear of the site. I think that's actually what the neighbor's talking about. I don't think it is implicated here because there is a landscaping buffer zone being provided between the parking lot extension at the rear of the subject property line. So, so I think it's actually being protected, and you can't get there from there. Plans show that there is a drive-through, and that this is a Taco Bell. Drive-throughs are permitted as of right in C2 zoning districts. As to the findings, there is a deed and title company support for this being a pre-61 lot, which is a requirement, and I think adequate landscaping is being provided, rolled out and rolled out. Anybody
And
else?
they state there's no feasibility of developing the remaining 3,000 square feet that's in the residential district as of right. And I believe the minimum lot size is 3,800 square feet, and they only have 3,000 square feet.
And it does not have a street access.
Right.
Unless Hamlin Place is somehow 10-foot wide considered access, which I doubt.
Yeah.
They'd need to come to us, and the fire department would say no. Okay. Move on?
Item number 3, 2018-54BZ, 761 Sheridan Avenue, also known as 757 Concourse Village West, the Bronx.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval. With respect to the findings relative to the search for a conforming site, the statement of fact states that the criteria for the search were rental properties with existing standalone buildings with 52,000 square feet, but the subject site is a vacant lot, so I'd like them to clarify that search. Were they looking for vacant lots also and didn't find any, and this is the only one? Yeah. So the current school is in School District 9, and the proposed location is in School District 7, and that confused me a little bit. And so I just didn't understand how that's fulfilling the needs of District 9's catchment area. They said they have kids who are both in 7 and 9. And what I don't understand is anything about your rights to attend a school that's not in your district. I think I read that this is some kind of a free district area, so you don't need to attend the school in your district, but I'm just curious whether by moving into 7, some of the kids can't attend the school. I just didn't really understand that. Not apparently, but I didn't understand. I'm a bit confused also about the statement in the statement of facts that the school will be K-5, and only if it receives its middle school charter will it go to the 8th grade. Most of the fourth floor is for the middle school, so what happens if it doesn't receive its charter? We had another school with the same issue, and they said they would rent the upper floor to another school. So is that the plan? Because we're giving a special permit to occupy as a school, it better be a school. They need the 28 dBA window wall attenuation, needs to be shown on the drawings. It is actually shown on the drawings, but we need that to be a condition. I was confused by the statement of facts that states the insulation is already installed. The building's under construction, so I don't understand that statement, which was repeated a few times in the statement. I also don't see a note for an STC rating of 40, which is stated in the statement of facts, but shows nowhere on the drawings. STC has to do with heat loss. The resolution should make clear that the only waiver sought here is use.
It's a special permit.
Yeah, right. But I just want to make sure that, because we're not reviewing detailed compliance with the bulk regulations for C8, and I want to make sure that the DOB knows that this is a special permit and only as to use, right? I want to just verify on seeker that we're good on air quality. And DOT school safety had some comments, which says, please request that the applicant provide a table showing their multimodal trip generation estimate. They might exceed one or more seeker screening thresholds for further analysis of traffic and/or pedestrian under their full build-out scenario, so that would definitely need to be reviewed. Please request that the applicant investigate the feasibility of installing a half curb extension, which I actually think they drew on one of the drawings, on the southeast corner of Concourse Village West and East 156th Street, on the Grand Concourse Village West frontage to improve student visibility at the corner. So you see kind of a bulb on the drawings, but I don't know whether they submitted that to school safety or not.
There's
DOT review ongoing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Probably not the final word.
okay. Anybody else?
I just want the applicant to clarify the trip mode that has been stated in the statement. I think the numbers have been repeated and somewhere they're not represented properly, so they just need to be corrected.
Yeah, I got lost there, actually. I kept reading what I thought was the same thing, and then for a different school and different grades, and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question about the departure modal splits, because it says for 5th to 7th grade and then also 8th grade.
That's the same one.
25% depart by yellow bus. And I don't believe 7th and 8th graders are allowed on city yellow buses. So I think they should just clarify that. Maybe it's privately contracted yellow buses, but the rule is within city schools is that you go up to 6th grade and then 7th and 8th grade, you have to be on a public bus.
Oh,
Yeah. So I had a question about that. And then I had a question about their dismissal operation. It just seemed like it was very chaotic, because you have parents or caregivers who are given badges who are allowed to enter the school and pick up students to get into the car that's on the same side. But then the students who are going to be leaving by the bus are escorted by any one of either a team leader, a crossing guard, or a bus attendant to cross the street to get into a bus on the other side of the street.
Oh.
I was wondering, is this based on their other location? Do they have success with it? Because it just seems like there's a lot of entry and exit into the school during a very busy time. It seemed very chaotic to me.
maybe they could help us with a plan that shows who goes where, an operational plan. You know, part of it is also, we're seeing this in the statement of facts where they kind of try to distill. That's why I got confused about the modal splits, whereas it was clearer in the,
You mean like a chart? Like
Yeah,
if they had
chart.
like a... Yeah.
a chart or a drawing that shows those kids go this way, the other kids go that way, the bus is waiting over here, the cars are waiting over there, something like that.
Right, and it just seemed like, you know, if you have parents or caregivers who get an access badge so they can go into the school, that means they're dropping their car in the no standing, getting out, leaving it, and who knows how long it's going to take before they get back to the car. And it's not just two cars, and it's only 100 feet of no standing space. So that's why it's like, to me, it's a whole lot of planning that doesn't necessarily resolve the issue of safely and swiftly getting people in and out of the school.
Okay. You know, and so, I know we've voted on the other one already, but to the point of this location and the number of teachers who have cars, I think they found 9, and they said they're just going to sort of park around. Yeah,
Where is this?
This is closer to
This is-
the Yankee Stadium,
still.
and it is a,
But they have schools in lots of locations, and this seems to be their standard method, that they just have whatever that percentage is, then that ends up with 9 teachers parking, that they don't take care of the teachers' parking needs.
though I have to say, this area does have a lot more parking, like
Yeah.
public parking spaces, so, given its proximity to Yankee Stadium, so that might be another.
You mean the Yankee Stadium garages?
No,
Those are far away.
No,
Far away
but
and
there are some
expensive.
private ones. There are some private ones where you do monthly parking and things like that, in around that area. So, you know, there's a little bit more than,
Right, but if
Yeah.
it's by, you know, up by Yankee Stadium, you also have the courts there. And
That's true.
there's, I've gone there and taken my car for jury duty, and it's not that easy to
Yeah.
find parking
No, I
there
agree.
in the
I would
Bronx.
second that. I've certainly tried to park on the street in that area by the courts. It is, it is not pleasant.
no, I agree. Yeah.
And there are some conveniently priced lots, like $10 a day, and perhaps the school's going to do something with them. I don't know. But to your point that there are lots that are $10 or $11 a day, absolutely. But street parking in and of itself is definitely a
It
circle.
is not easy to find, I agree.
Okay. Item number 4, 2017-295BZ, 128 West 26th Street, Manhattan.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to neighbors and officials. Community Board recommends disapproval, stating that they do not believe the variance findings have been met and that the proposed is too tall for the neighborhood, recommending, if approved, a 12-story building with 125 feet instead. They do not oppose the setback waiver because it's more in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. They also oppose the balconies, which are kind of on both sides of the building, citing disturbance concerns to neighbors. They also oppose bars or restaurants in the retail space and on the roof, and to after-hours work permits during construction. They request also, as is already required by law, but especially poignant here, special efforts be taken to protect and ensure reimbursement for any further damage to the adjacent property at 130 West 26. And for those who haven't reviewed the materials, there was construction at 132 West 26 that undermined this building, and more importantly, it seems 130 West 26 next door, because it was immediately adjacent. We have a letter from the neighbor at 130 West 26.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm running out of time.
From neighbor at,
130 West 26, advising us of the history of construction at 132 West 26, that apparently had the effect of destabilizing both 130 and the subject building and causing the subject to be vacated. The neighbor advises that the three buildings are somehow interdependent and work at the subject may further threaten the stability of 130. The statement of fact states that demolition of the existing building is already in process. I'd like to hear about the current status. It's never really a good idea to demolish a building when you're relying on your statement about its condition to then look at a vacant lot. We had this problem on 19th Street. They should not have taken the building down. The engineering report provided indicates that the building could be returned to a safe condition. So I don't think it's right to assume that the board will agree that the site should be viewed as vacant unless we see that the reconstruction work would be infeasible. There are many 25 by 100 lots with buildings within the study area, and the structural engineer report said, in order to restore the premises to a reasonable state of structural permanent stability, the following at minimum must be implemented. The entire existing floor joists must be re-supported. New columns at both side walls at interior midspan will need to be threaded through the building, and new steel connecting girders and beams need to be attached to the columns and the existing joists shimmed to assure proper bearing. The new steel skeleton must include vertical, transverse, and lateral trusses to account for lateral earthquake loading, et cetera. I don't want to read the whole thing because there are 8 points. With respect to the uniqueness study, the study eliminates from comparison any sites improved with greater than 3 FAR. I don't find anywhere in the submission the FAR of the existing building, but my own math results in 3.8 FAR, and that's on the site. So shouldn't those lots under 4.1 FAR be put back into the equation until we agree we were talking about a vacant lot? I picked 4.1 because there were many lots with 4.03 and 05, and I hate when they leave out those even though they're effectively 4 FAR. So with respect to financial hardship, I agree with the community board that any settlement reached with the cause of the vacate has to be figured into the costs. BSA should not be compensating damages that will be awarded by a court. With respect to the allowable as-of-right uses in this M16, city planning on October 17th, much to our chagrin, and we actually protested this, voted to approve a text amendment that will prohibit as-of-right development of hotels except by CPC special permit. City Council now has to decide whether to approve, so it should be decided fairly shortly. This effectively limits as-of-right alternative uses in M districts to offices in cases where industrial uses are not viable on small lots. So, and we actually discussed this with city planning, and now we're down to one alternative use in these districts. With respect to office as-of-right, I'd like to know why the setback is at 61 feet when the maximum base height is 85, and why the building is only 141 feet high when the proposed is 148, or vice versa, since the as-of-right has 10-foot floor-to-floor heights. I don't find the floor-to-floor heights of the proposed, and the drawings only show floor-to-ceiling heights of 9'6". And also, I'd like to know why the first level is treated as a basement in the as-of-right, but not in the proposed, and vice versa. Why isn't the elevator and stair core in the as-of-right treated the same as in the proposed? It's much nicer in the proposed. Makes much more sensible in terms of amount of usable space. With respect to neighborhood character, I'm not understanding actually the community board's request that the height be kept at 12 stories and 125 feet, where the adjacent buildings to the east of the, and 3 lots over to the west are actually taller than the proposed. The community board says that they're not tall until you get to the corner, but it's not, they're tall immediately adjacent to the site. So I actually, and this is really a classic sort of fashion district street wall street, where it rises without setback up the street wall. So then you wonder, how did city planning come up with setbacks at 85 feet when you have 12-story buildings all over the place? I just wondering. So they have these things called ledges on the front facade that are projecting beyond the property line. There are what I think are sliding doors that imply those are accessible. So do they comply with code and zoning, first of all? They aren't dimensioned. And I'd like to know how they're justified within the neighborhood character. They look a little odd, frankly. And, this is an area where there's heavy cornices and other kinds of modulation because in the masonry buildings. I could understand that you'd have something like that referring to cornices, but this almost is sort of slapped on, so I'm not really understanding what that's about. They need to respond to the community board's concerns about the proposed rear balconies. There's concern that that'll negatively affect neighbors. And then, finally, DEP has a June 22nd letter requiring a Phase 2, and there's also a June 29th DEP comment on noise and air quality that needs to be responded to. Okay. Anybody else?
No, you picked up on
Okay.
I just wanted to say that I think that to base your uniqueness on an issue that happened with this building and the building 2 doors down that caused a destabilization when you're demolishing the building shouldn't even be considered as a uniqueness finding at all. So I know how you were stating that, we have to make sure that the costs shouldn't be compensated for by us. I don't even think it should be considered because there's no longer a building there. It's vacant. And so therefore, the whole uniqueness should be based on the fact that this is a 25 by 100 foot vacant lot. And then we can not worry about all of those destabilization costs because we know they're going to be compensated. So that's not an issue for us. And it shouldn't be anything that we're considering or even giving them some kind of, waiver to overcome. Because this becomes a civil matter between 2 property owners.
Right.
Like there is everywhere in the city when somebody is destabilizing their adjacent through some kind of construction issue.
Okay. But so what I'm trying to get at is it right to assume this is a vacant lot? Because there's a structural report that says, as far as I understand it, you can fix this building, and now you have a 5-story building like so many other buildings in this area, and then what? Then you're making an obsolescence argument or something like that, if you're making any argument at all?
Right, but once you demolish the building, you've kind of made the
Then you're done.
choice
Yes.
that it's, whatever it would cost to repair it is not worth your time. And so it's a vacant lot, and then we could say now you're arguing the point that it's a narrow vacant lot. Well, it's also brushing off on the self-created hardship portion.
that's the
So I'm not
part,
saying
yeah.
that it's an easy path, but I'm
Oh,
just
okay.
saying that we need to not talk about the potential destabilization, because that no longer exists once you demolish the building. So let's kind of make this as clear-cut, clean argument, which is, let's rely on what we have here. We have a property that either has a already demolished or soon-to-be completely demolished building. And now try and point out your uniqueness to us and convince us that it's not a self-created hardship as well. And that's your lift here.
Okay.
So I was having a bit of difficulty with that, only because we're working on the assumption that they are going to be compensated. While this case may turn out that, yes, this terrible thing happened, but it's not the fault, it's not, the causation of it is not, there's no one at fault for it, or the particular person that you're commencing the lawsuit against is not at particular fault for it. So if then the applicant made a cost-benefit analysis and found, I will spend less money by knocking this down than repairing it, I think then we would have to consider that as the uniqueness argument as to its damages. If they're being compensated in a civil case from it, that's a very different argument.
It's just so typical that you're compensated.
Oh, no,
Right?
I don't know if it's safe to, I don't know the status of the case. That's one of the things that I'd like to know. Where are they in this case? Because they didn't claim that from what I understand, there isn't a settlement or a decision, a final decision. Do you have
Right.
something, Lorraine?
Sorry for my microphone.
I was going to ask. Sorry. I was going to ask, though, because the board so often removes itself from questions about civil litigation, why then in this case would we be asking for the status of the litigation? And the second thing is that we're here to relieve property owners from the overreaching of zoning, so the action by the city that prevents the development of the site. So to the extent that something a neighbor did implicates the site adversely, that infringes on the property rights, how can we as a board, in a way, disincentivize seeking civil relief?
My argument is we don't know that yet. We don't know if the neighbor has caused this issue yet. We know there's a case, and we don't know the result of that case. So I'm not sure at this point.
Of course we know. They said that in the statement of facts. They mentioned that the building next door was under construction. And
We know
it
they
did cause
were
settlement
underpinned.
and cracking in their building, and that's why.
That's what they're submitting. They're saying this is what happened.
So wait a second, so before they're relying, their entire argument hinges on the idea that they
Fair.
didn't come to a building and they walk in the building and then the building turns out to have been in really, really bad shape and they didn't realize it. This is a situation where the neighbor's building is leaning 9 inches to the west or east or something like that, right? As a direct result, as stated by the neighbor, of the construction work next door, right? We don't need to get into whether they win, they lose, whatever. It's the same as the other case that we have where they came back to us for more floor area, and initially they said, we need more floor area because while the guy next door was doing work, they built on our property. And we said, we're not going to compensate you for those guys building on your property. Go to those guys and seek redress, right? Same thing here. So if we look at so maybe now I'm understanding a little bit better what Commissioner Otley Brown said. If we look at the cost to reconstruct this existing building, that all of that work has to be assumed is going to be compensated for by the
cause of such problem.
the
right.
cause. Because they're the one telling us, this happened, it wasn't our fault, it happened to the neighbor, it's not us being a negligent owner, because we've also seen cases where the owner just lets it rot. And then they come here and they say, oh, it's going to cost us $1 million to build it over again. Well, you're the one who let it rot, or your predecessor in interest. In this case, it wasn't letting it rot. It was not the fault of the owner that the building is now in this unstable condition. But, so then I asked that question. If the building is retrievable, and there is the assumption of that in a lawsuit, that engineer who's hired as an expert persuades the court that it's going to cost $4 million, whatever it is, to fix this building, then the building is a perfectly fine 5-story building. That's assuming that that engineering is possible. Then why are we looking at it as a vacant lot if it can be stabilized? Because the court won't force the property owner to tear their building down.
Right, but we're looking at it as a vacant lot because it's actually vacant or a step away from being.
Well, that's the thing
It
is,
is
how
being
far is the
demolished.
It's being
demolition?
demolished.
Last time I checked, the two floors or at least one floor has been demolished.
Okay, of a 5-story building.
Well, they should at least answer the question. Are we fully demolishing this and it's just taking a little time? Or is it that we're only partially demolishing it? And if we're partially demolishing it, then we could talk about the obsolescence that wasn't of their making, and it was a destabilization, and the building is still going to remain. But if the building is going to be completely removed,
Right.
so that this is vacant,
So then
then
we
we
have,
can't consider it as a building.
right.
We have to consider it as vacant.
And then we talk about, when we go to self-created, we say that the question is, you had the option, according to your engineer's report, of just fixing this building up, likely to be compensated for all the damage caused by the neighbor. So how aren't you, wasn't that
Self-creating your
self-created?
vacant narrow hardship
Yes.
by getting rid of the building that somebody else is supposed to restabilize for you and
Right.
almost rebuild.
Right. It'd be different if, how would it be different? No matter what, they would be compensated for whatever it is they lost, even if, this is the next part of it. Let's say the damage is so extreme, like we saw around the corner on Broadway, the damage is so extreme that the building has to come down. Then they still receive the value of something, right? Do we consider somewhere in there the value of the something?
No, because they've been
Well,
made
that-
whole by somebody else.
But
So
if we don't
therefore,
consider
that
it, they could
can't
double
be-
dip.
No, that's what I mean.
Right,
They've
it
been made
would
whole.
be, right, so it would be double dipping
If
to
we
come
could,
here.
so
Yes.
this is where maybe.
Right.
Which is why I don't think there's a case here. But, I'm willing to wait for everybody else to arrive at that conclusion.
Well, I appreciate that. Again, I think that we have to keep in mind, I don't like making a determination on what if that will become whole by a compensation. If it is that person's fault, that there's something certain about a hearing or what a settlement is in that case to at least let us know where we are. Because otherwise, we don't have any review to do whatsoever.
There is no way to prosecute that and prove that.
No, I don't
was
think
it
we
that
do it.
guy fault or the other guy fault? There is no way to prove it.
Well, that's something they're going to do in court.
And I
We
believe-
stayed for that.
We never get involved in what it is courts decide, right? For instance, with these easement battles, which we see so often, we just tell the property owners, go fight it in court, and when you're done, you can come back if you still have a problem, right? That's the classic one, but we don't get involved in who's the right on the easement. The same here, all we can do is assume, because it's reasonable to assume, that there will be an award of damages, because it's not just this guy who's saying his building was demolished or damaged, it's the neighbor the entire co-op board or whatever, who's saying that their building was damaged by the underpinning work that was badly done by the adjoining property owner. Plus, you can see on the Department of Buildings records that the underpinning was improperly done, there was damage to the site and all of that. So it seems like this is one of those.
So my difficulty is,
Yeah.
with that, I'm not saying getting involved in it. The part I'm having some trouble with is the issue of double dipping at the end of it. If we do make any allotment we make, if we were to make any finding here, then, and there is an additional compensation in that court, that would be, we're trying to give a remedy to this owner that he may already have.
But he's never going to get from the court a remedy for zoning.
Sure,
Which is
but-
why I think that Commissioner Otley Brown's point about looking at the lot as it is and looking and analyzing the uniqueness from a vacant lot perspective is perhaps the best way to go and the best way to avoid possibly overcompensating this property owner.
And while I understand that there's a financial hardship, there's a financial hardship that we weigh when we do a remedy, and if they're receiving both ends of that, that could be I think it's somewhat relevant. I haven't come to terms with what the best, in my opinion, perhaps staying it to see, or getting a better understanding of what they're doing.
But would you agree that if it were to be shown that this is an absolutely unique site and that zoning
Independently.
It's
Yeah,
unique.
okay.
And zoning independently is creating a hardship for this owner, aren't they entitled to get that plus the compensation from the court for the civil damage caused by, so I'm not quite understanding why double dipping is necessarily the right word to use, because the board is here to only compensate them for the adverse effect of zoning. It's not as to what someone else did and happened to affect them and put them in a bad position with regard to utilizing their site, right?
I believe it's gonna depend whether it's double dipping or not. It's gonna depend on the way the financial will be looked at. If we
Which I get, that speaks to-
consider the site as a vacant lot, the building is not there. So just forget about the building. Imagine that it never been there.
Does not exist.
Forget it. Just look at the site as a vacant lot. We're not double dipping. We don't need to consider the settlement. And the dangerous thing about considering the settlement is this. The settlement is a decision between two people disputing.
They can
in front of the
always
court.
settle.
Yeah, probably the guy, it was fair that the guy settled for $1 million and he decided to settle just for $10. If he decides to take this and we put it in our equation, it's kind of very low settlement, it's not favorable for him. So the consequence for this is we have to compensate him for the difference between what he should have gotten as a fair settlement and the $10.
Well,
I don't see
I
that.
agree with your point, but also there's a wrinkle in this story, which is that the previous owner is who has commenced the civil action, not the current owner.
Correct. So the current owner wouldn't even get
The current
compensated.
owner won't get compensated, but the current owner was compensated through the sales price.
Yeah.
You know, nobody is going out there and purchasing a property and going, you know what, I'm gonna overpay for this by a gazillion dollars. I'm sure, I mean, okay, but I'm sure a shrewd purchaser, which is what we're supposed to be considering here, shrewd purchasers, not that moron who just comes along and is like, I just want to own a piece of property in Manhattan, I don't really care what it costs me. A shrewd purchaser is going to say, you've got an issue on this lot with a building that might very well have to be demolished. I am not paying for that building when I pay you. Or I'm paying for it and I'm getting a portion of the settlement.
Right.
But they're certainly not going to say, I'm going to pay for this building as if it's a brand-new building that's been made whole, and yet I'm not getting the benefit of the settlement. I'm going to go to the BSA and just throw caution to the wind and take my chances and hope that they are suckered into my story. That's not going to happen. So I still think that this has to be considered as is. It's a vacant lot.
But if we do it like that, then the question of self-created does come up. And
Yes.
Yes, it does.
And it's not our job to make their case for them. It's just our job to say what we don't find a convincing case.
The other point that the chair spoke about is the concept of let it rot. The chair kind of like excluded this in a situation like the current situation. I wouldn't even, in this situation, I wouldn't exclude that probability, because in some cases, and I've seen this in the city, when a new owner for a site comes to build next to an existing building, sometimes there is a hidden deal between the two building owners that the existing building owner goes easy on the guy and allow him to do some sort of like really weak underpinning system or an easy go SOE system for a specific payment. Who knows? Maybe that was a
The
kind of.
difference is that the work was done adjacent to the occupied co-op building, right? What's crazy about this is the three buildings are tied together. And I find it so incredible that the underpinning 2 buildings away,
One building removed.
one building removed, undermined the subject building, which isn't even next door. It wasn't even the one being underpinned. That's what's surprising. I mean, you don't expect that building.
I guess because the adjacent building didn't get underpinned, it started leaning into this building, and that's what.
Well, apparently they're sort of in some way we saw that on 22nd Street, right? Where the buildings were somehow or other leaning into each other. And that was the argument made, even though it turned out not to be the
Holding each
case,
other.
That the building in the middle, the one that was our building, one building was leaning this way and one building was leaning that way, therefore you couldn't tear down this building or both those buildings would fall down. That was the argument made. Never mind. Turned out not to be.
Possible.
Never mind. Okay.
Move on.
I just want to add one thing. I think apart from the uniqueness, when I was reviewing the project in terms of the bulk and in terms of the height, and the variance that's before us is for the use to allow for residential use. In terms of the neighborhood character and what is being proposed, the build form, I think it's totally in keeping with it. So it's the question of meeting that first threshold, but the rest are.
Of making the case.
Right.
Yes, the A finding is definitely the threshold finding.
Yes.
You're absolutely right.
So you gotta have an A and you gotta have a B. Otherwise, we don't need to talk about neighborhood character. And by the way, it gets capped off with that self-created hardship thing that can just rock your world.
Regarding the cost estimate, I need a detailed cost estimate like usual. Hopefully we can this week finalize that sample, the template we're preparing, and we can just issue to people so they can follow that template. But I need details of the quantity estimate, and I need the SOE drawings, the conditions for the buildings next door, the adjacent building conditions, whether they have cellars or not, how deep are these cellars, and I need the structural drawings for the buildings. All these need to be provided to us in order for us to look at the cost estimate more accurately.
So I do, should we get past A to B, have some comments on the financials. I believe the site should be valued as if it's vacant, and therefore, care should be made when choosing comparables, that the comparables with 5, 6, 7-story buildings on them that are occupied should not be used, because in that case, people are purchasing the land plus building, and in this case, there's only land. So I would accept either vacant land or severely underbuilt properties, or buildings where they have proof that the building is about to be demolished, to be redeveloped. For the retail leases, this is a question more like your question, Chair, about the layouts, because there's an extra like 250 square feet of space in the proposed that's being leased versus in the as of right, because of the changing the location of the egress stairs and the core. And so I want to know whether or not they're going to actually change the plans to make them both almost exactly the same, or if there's some code requirement that limits their ability to do so. For the residential sales prices, they have comps in it, and only one comp has a small outdoor space, but this site actually has a lot of outdoor space on the second floor roof terrace, 600 square feet, as well as 100 square foot balconies in the rear of each apartment, going all the way up from the third floor to the top. And so they're comparables. Only one comparable has a balcony, and in their pricing scheme, they're not accounting for any outdoor space whatsoever in the sales price, so they have to correct that. And their hotel rates, their occupancy rate for the stabilized third year, and their average daily rate for the first year is based on the first quarter report. And the first quarter is generally the slowest quarter for hotels, because that's the period right after the holidays. And so what I would like to see is that they give us either the third quarter, because that's actually should be available now, and it's probably going to be a continued hearing, so the third quarter 2018, or the average of the end of year last year for both of those statistics.
I have a question about the hotel, though. In a minute, it won't be legal to build a hotel as of right.
Oh, in which case,
location.
we don't even have to deal with it, which is fine with me, especially since their hotel income and expense analysis is actually missing, and just the final net operating income is included, and so I was going to ask for that information, but if I don't have to trouble myself to go through that, I'd be fine not doing that.
Can that be considered as a lesser variance?
No,
I'm not sure the
It'd be
argument is there.
use
No,
variance
oh,
just the same, no?
it's a use variance, and by the way, to do a variance for a hotel at this moment, when there's a special permit there, I don't relish this as a concept, but it's not an as of right. You would need a special permit, so you can't, right?
And one that we don't give, right? It's
Yeah,
a
it's
city planning special
permit.
Yeah.
And a lesser variance, I don't see why it's lesser, it's a use change, whichever. Yeah, and so the only chances, and I don't know what the city council's opinion has been about this legislation. I don't know whether they have a problem with it or they're okay with it or not. I mean, I know the community boards were in favor of it, but I don't know about city council. Okay.
When it was originally reviewed, as of right, was hotel.
Yes, and we didn't even know if this was going through, and by the way, I'm pretty sure, like, the second it hits, there's going to be a lot of litigation, so it
It's happening right
stays.
now.
Yeah, it's happening now, even though you
About their
need an
authority, yeah.
injured party, and there's no injury yet, I think. There's no injury because it hasn't yet.
Oh, it hasn't
occurred.
gone into effect?
Right, so. But yeah, you're right, there's some kind of litigation, but I don't know how they bring it if there's no injured party. Okay. Move on? Anybody else?
That's it for me.
Okay.
Item number 5, 2018-64BZ, 2018-65A7, 25 Mobile Road, Queens.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board provided their meeting notes, which indicated that there were 13 members of the public who spoke on the application, 25 letters in support, a petition against, and a motion to oppose, and it failed with a vote of 16 to deny, 9 opposed to the motion, and 8 abstentions. So the Community Board moved to oppose, but the motion failed. And they didn't have a new vote. I think there is no question that there is no as-of-right building that can be built on this lot, and independent of the House of Worship deference standard, this is a unique shallow lot. The main question for me is whether all of the many requested variances are the minimum relief, and whether the hardship is self-created. That's a big one for me, which is not, I don't know where that falls in the deference mode. Since lots 22 and 13 have been held in common ownership since at least 1975, and there's a very large house on the combined zoning lot. And we've seen houses converted into houses of worship, so why not, if they own that house too, why not enlarge the house and create a house of worship? With respect to the size of the zoning lot and ownership, the synagogue says that they're a contract vendee, but of which parcel or parcels? Is it lot 13 and 22 together, or only lot 22, on which the synagogue is proposed to be constructed? The tax map shows a strange lot 22, because there's an application to reapportion this tax lot into 13 and 22. There's already a lot 22 on the tax map that shows this long skinny 10-foot strip. That's perpendicular to Reed's Lane. They need to explain what that is. Is that part of the purchase? What is that? Fire department submitted a letter of objection on October 9th, stating the location of all required fire department connections for the proposed building with the distance to a serviceable hydrant needs to be shown. The location of the main entrance and egress location to and from the proposed building was not also shown, I guess. Road widths are not shown. The street status of Mobile Road and Reed's Lane must be indicated on the submitted plan. The department does not agree with providing relief for the parking requirement due to the narrow width of Mobile Road, which will have illegal parking if no parking is provided. DEP also had strong comments about building in the bed of Mobile Road in its October 5th and June 29th letters. The October 5th letter is in response to the applicant's response to its June 29th letter. I actually don't see why the project can't comply with DEP's request to keep that open by pulling the wall back. It looks like only a small portion of the one-story addition on the existing adjacent house protrudes into the widening line, so you can't say that everybody is already built forward of the widening line. It doesn't look like anyone is, and that's just kind of a little porch extension on the house next door. DEP also had requirements for the applicant to submit a plan survey that shows, well, this is again about the 30-foot widening line, and also to show distances from the lot line to the existing 8-inch diameter sanitary sewer, water main, and fire hydrant. And then with respect to the 100% parking waiver, fire department expressed concerns that parking would clog the narrow streets, preventing access. The congregant list, so we often have these variance applications where they also move to eliminate the parking entirely by showing a congregant list that shows that congregants are located within three-quarters of a mile of the site. The list that they did provide, and the reason for that is because city planning has a special permit that waives parking for houses of worship, so we're just applying the same standard as city planning. They provided a list of congregants, but actually it should have been a map that shows where people are located relative to the site, because it's impossible to use a list. The statement of facts is actually internally inconsistent on the required number of parking spaces for this project. Required side yard widths are also inconsistent between the plans and the statement of facts. The maximum street wall height information conflicts between neighborhood character study and the statement of facts and plans, 21 versus 25 feet. With respect to the building height, the wall height proposed is 27 feet, but the height to the roof is 35 feet. The drawings don't indicate whether that is complying or show the sky exposure plane location. Surely the building penetrates the sky exposure plane because it's built right to the street line, so how could it not? The character study asks whether the requested 1.39 FAR compared with the allowable 0.85 FAR is in character, and it concludes that it is because the floor area of the individual houses surrounding it are high, though on their large lots the FAR is low. It doesn't, however, look at whether the proposed lot area of 5,372 square feet is in keeping with character. And then, of course, lot coverage and all of those other things it doesn't look at. So this lot, if this was a standalone lot, this building is filling the lot completely to its edges, whereas for the most part, we see houses that are kind of mansion style, sitting very comfortably on their sites. So I'm not really sure how that character study really gets there. The character study is also applying residential regulations to this community facility. Though the R2X district has a 20-foot rear yard requirement for residential use, community facility uses are subject to 30-foot requirements. The study should be amended to reflect the differences in requirements between the two uses. The EAS does the same thing. In an R2X community facility, FAR is regulated by the R district maximums. They should see 24-111A. And although I admit that the language in 24-11 directly conflicts, it actually directly conflicts with 24-111A, and I believe CPC is aware of the conflict that was created in 2016, nonetheless, it's not been corrected, so the more restrictive must apply, and therefore, it's a .85 FAR max. That's also the case in the EAS for the rear yard requirement for community facilities, it's not 20 feet. With respect to the general impact of the project on the neighborhood, how is pedestrian impact prior to and after services handled? There is no space for anyone to stand outside. And what about parking when not during the holidays? And what about noise? How is this building design compatible with character? Because it's very institutional looking. And what are the exterior facade materials, landscaping, fencing, trash controls? The EAS parking study assumes only 5% of the congregation will drive on non-holidays. I'd like to know where that number comes from. Where is the backup to support the statement that there is, quote, ample on-street parking to meet demand? That's all it said. It just said, there's plenty of parking, so no problem. I don't consider that a study by an expert. So, anybody else?
I think my major concern was with the location of the site and Mobile Road being the main access point for this facility. It's an extremely narrow road. There is no, and what surprised me from the site visit, but there were cars parked on Mobile Road, and there is no signage of any sort that prohibits or allows or anything. So, and most of it acts as a rear access road, but there are few buildings that are fronting Mobile Road. So I think my biggest concern with this is traffic. Yes, we are looking at the major holiday season in terms of when most of the congregants will be walking, but the daily operations of the prayer services and others are very much likely to bring congregants not just walking, but also by other mode of transportation. And at least from my site visit, I didn't notice that much of parking available. So I definitely do need to see that parking study and understand the capacity. And there shouldn't be any parking allowed on Mobile Road, even if that's been happening illegally. There should be signage posted there, something.
I want to just...
And I want to know from the program, like, how many congregants attend the afternoon, evening, and the morning prayer? The statement was not very clear about that, and how do they arrive? All of this documentation needs to be provided.
With respect to this issue of parking, it's different when we're doing the GCL waivers, where we can impose requirements because they're private roads. Here, we have, this property owner has no control over the parking standards. So...
Unless it comes out the DOT's conditional net deck or whatever.
And so the DOT and the police department have to enforce no parking regulations.
I have an issue with the bulk of this building on this very narrow street. I think it's very large, and while the first and second floor heights might be able to be justified by the program, the additional 8 feet to the roof, under the sloped roof, I don't know how you justify that, because there isn't even a floor there or any floor area. It's just an extra 8 feet on top of the 13-foot second floor height. So, and it's making the building, to me, look very large, especially on that very narrow street. And when you drive down that street, it's going to be like looming over the entire street. So I have a question about that, and whether or not they could somehow bring that height down by making a mansard roof on that second floor that, you know, and then you're illuminating 8 feet at least, or close to it. And why the need for a flat roof is the other issue.
Yeah.
What's going on there that they have to go up 8 feet and then have a flat roof instead of at least tapering to a ridge height?
We had seen another synagogue also where I think we had a similar situation. There was a mansard roof, like a fake mansard roof, and it had a flat roof behind it, and we were concerned about what it was going to be used
Yes.
as. And that's a good point. I did notice that also, and I think we need
Right, it had these
clarification.
flying parapet walls, basically, that were very high, yeah. Anybody else? Any other comments? Okay.
Item number 6, 2018-107BZ, 1441 South Avenue, Staten Island. Charter school.
We have a proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. July 25th, Community Board waived its right to hear this, citing community support for the application, so they didn't hear it, but I guess that's the general feeling. I'd like the applicant to clarify how the existing schools were able to establish in an N1 district without a variance or special permit. I'm assuming it's a Port Authority zoning override, but they didn't tell us that. They're making us assume. I'd like to know, is the idea that all levels of the school use the fourth floor amenities? And is the roof urban farm accessible to all building occupants or only the school? There's a lot of different descriptions of these different programs all over the place, and they sometimes conflict with each other, so it's not 100% clear that the fourth floor is open to all of the students at the different schools. I'd like to know why there are only 2 classes for K through 2nd grade, but 6 classes for 3rd through 5th, and similar questions for the 8th through 12th grades. And I didn't find 6th and 7th graders. Where do they go? Are they in another part of the compound? In a different one of the buildings off on the campus? Also, how does the New Ventures program work with only 1 classroom for 216 students and 24 staff, as described in the statement of facts? I'm not sure, are they all like in the cooking program and things like that, so therefore they don't really need a classroom? I just don't understand that. The programmatic needs analysis and elsewhere states that New Ventures begins at 3:15 p.m., but the sample schedule on page 64 shows it starting at 1:10, which is like the last page of programmatic needs. It's kind of like thrown in there. You need to clarify that. With respect to Nicotra Early College, I'm still a little confused about that program. I thought these are students already enrolled in high school, and they come to this for supplemental learning, maybe not, or is this a standalone program? And then we see sort of a schedule on page 63 of the programmatic needs report that talks about A through G bands. What are those? What are bands? The classroom utilization chart isn't tied to the plans or to the classroom grade designation, so it's not possible to follow that. I must admit that other than the K-5 program, I'm confused about how the school operates, including how the things called movement rooms, kitchen, weight room, et cetera, are integrated into the learning day. Where do the children go to play, and where do the older children go to meet physical education requirements, since there's no gym per se, which is so unusual. We see gyms in all the schools we review, or almost all the schools. With respect to programmatic requirements, why is there an institutional kitchen, yet food is prepared off-site? They should provide more detail on what they call the fine dining and conferences aspects of the New Ventures program. The programmatic needs report states that the science room, according to the School Construction Authority standards, should be located at the top of the stacking because of the need for exhaust and fume hoods. This is an office building with offices on the floors immediately above. How are the fume hoods addressed so that they're not poisoning the office workers? And does the existing trash processing at Corporate Commons 2 have refrigerated trash storage? Because here you have a commercial kitchen. So it's a different situation. And how are children protected from the loading dock area, which is immediately next to the entrance to the building? How are fire stairs controlled to prevent access by strangers onto school floors and access by students onto office floors? Same for the elevators. There's kind of this really large main stair that implies that the kids will come in and walk up the large main stair to get into the school. But that's the fire stair for the whole building, so how's that work? I do see they have an interconnecting stair within the building. Why not add that? A separate staircase just for the school that drops down to the lobby level. And then where there are 7 school buses that are picking the kids, where are they kept when they're not picking and dropping off? And how, in terms of logistics, do the same 7 buses pick up and deliver home K through 5 at 2:45 to 3:20, but also pick up from work or school and drop off at the site the new ventures students from 3:15 to 3:55? It's the same 7 buses. They're doing double duty at the same time. I didn't understand that. The project has already undergone seeker review under the disposition Euler of action with a December 2016 negative declaration. A March 2018 tech memo was provided to the BSA to capture the change in proposed use and increase in floor area. I believe the lead agency has been informed that there is in fact a discretionary action being sought now on the site, but I want to make sure, because that's something that's said actually in the EAS, there's no discretionary actions being sought. So they were supposed to prepare a RAP and a CHASP under the prior neg deck. Has that been done? Also, they were supposed to have prepared a stormwater pollution prevention plan. Did they do that? And does this modified use and increase in floor area and population, significant increase, 1,573 students, change the amount of wastewater production, and is it sufficient to cause concern relative to what the EAS considered? And what about air quality and noise in the area relative to the use of the site by children? I believe the tech memo requires 31 dBA sound attenuation. That needs to be shown on the drawings. And the negative declaration refers to an area on the larger property that is being preserved as undeveloped. They should provide a site map showing the relationship of the proposed project and Commons 1 and 2 to the natural area, and provide the drawings to which the negative declaration refers. Those are my comments.
I just needed, I think you have mentioned it, I think more specifically, I was confused with one of the elements of the programmatic need, and that is somewhere in the statement of fact, it says that the 3rd floor will be occupied by La Villa Prep and 4th floor by New Venture. But then, again, in the statement of fact, somewhere, again, it said that La Villa will occupy 3rd and parts of 4th floor. So it wasn't quite clear whether they were classrooms or these were the common spaces that was going to be used. With regards to the outdoor recreation you had raised, the statement of fact states that it will continue to use the on-site basketball court and play area at the corporate commons. And they have made additional arrangement with the Staten Island Boys Football League, which they will use during the daytime, which is located within the corporate park. And that seems to be the current function, and I accepted that as their outdoor activity.
So that was what I was trying to understand. So they make kind of a mention of that, but they don't.
Is that the permanent?
Yeah, so is it the permanent? Is it an organized thing? Because we don't see on any of their day schedule that the kids go outside. We see they go to the art room and the music room, but we don't see how, like, the movement rooms are used. We don't see how, when you go outside, and whether that's still available. And whether the relationship to the boys, whatever, basketball is permanent.
Yeah, okay.
I had a question that goes to probably the minimal variance, and it has to do with the SCA requirements for classroom space. And it talks about 750 square feet as being the wished-for number, but that's for a classroom that houses 36 students. So it comes out to like 20 square feet per student. But in this case, the classrooms are approximately 750 square feet each, but they're only for 17 to 18 students in each classroom. And so that ends up being 42 square feet per student. So they would need to justify why they need 42 square feet per student.
And just to, for their benefit, we often have different kinds of pedagogical pursuits with the schools, all different kinds. And so that's what they have to do. What's the pedagogy here for this type of student who has special needs? Might they need more space because of whatever, however the classes are taught?
And I just had a question. It doesn't seem like any of the students walk to school. So the question is, do any of the students walk to the school? And if so, how is their safety guaranteed?
From its location, I don't see many, but I hope to hear from the applicant walking to school.
It's too far away from everything, and it's such a huge
Yeah.
site.
How do they get the bus service to serve the high school, though?
I think it's private buses.
It is, it's private? Yeah, they
is
should
a
just
char-
address that.
Yeah. But curious about this, do any kids ride a bike, for example? Same kind of issue, right? Might ride the bike to school, especially the high school students. And then what?
Yeah.
Are there bike lanes? Is there something? Any others? No other comments?
Okay, this concludes the public review session for October 22nd, 2018.